It is super light. This is a landfill out. That's incredible. Let me see. That's gorgeous. That is gorgeous.
Well, welcome everyone.
Did they get any like drone
It's
pictures?
time that we get started.
Drone?
Thank you all for being here. We'll go ahead and start tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd like to join me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We've asked Commissioner Logan Johnson to begin tonight with a thought or a legislative prayer. Commissioner.
Yeah, I had the opportunity on Monday to view the total eclipse. I don't know if anyone else made it up to that total eclipse zone, but that was a whole different experience than just seeing the partial eclipse. And we went up to a city called Alpine up in Wyoming or Idaho. It's really close to the border. And there was a little bit of a lesson that I learned in planning, in that you can't plan for everything. We drove up there and watched the infrastructure of the city kind of fail with regards to all the traffic and some of the issues that we ran into. It kind of woke my eyes up a little bit. You got to kind of think outside the box when it comes to planning and be ready for anything, including an eclipse. And kind of just wanted to brag too that I got to see a total eclipse. And I'll also begin with prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we come before Thee this evening. We're grateful for the opportunity to serve. We ask Thee for Thy Spirit to guide our discussions, to help us make progress and achieve the goals of the city. And we say this prayer in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Commissioner. I got to see 97% of it, which
Pretty
means
cool.
I really didn't see it.
No, that's cool.
I saw it with the slipper, but the total eclipse looked awesome from the pictures I've seen. So, okay, we've got a fairly full agenda tonight, but since our minutes from last meeting will really feed into one of our major topics tonight, we'll go ahead and review the minutes at this time. So minutes from the August 9th meeting. We'll go through this page by page. If anyone has comments after having reviewed the minutes, bring those to the attention of the chair and we'll make appropriate changes. So page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. I'm just wondering, is Corey Haddock's name spelled that way?
I was actually gonna. I was just pulling it up right then, but it's with a K at the end.
I think it is too. So Corey Haddock, Haddock. Anything else on page 4?
Just that the rest of those Haddocks should be changed
Yeah.
as well.
Yes, all of the Haddocks should be changed. Thank you. Page 5.
I have a change on page 5. I'm just on line 32. It would just, unless we want to include quotation marks, it might be better just to say what the target market for the proposed development would be. So just take that to the end.
Thank you. Any other changes on page 5? Truncated page 6.
I have a change on that. While I said being so patient, I said it in a little bit of, so it was a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek when I said that. So we could either put quotation marks around so patient if we don't want to change it too much, but I'm not sure if that's appropriate. So I wrote, instead of saying that, I said, Mr. Spenlove, Commissioner Wright asked Mr. Spenlove, given the difficulties they've had on this and other proposals, why Brighton Homes continues to pursue options in Centerville. But we don't have to do that. We could keep it tongue-in-cheek and do the quotations, whatever.
I'd rather leave the tongue-in-cheek out of our minutes.
That's,
so I like
yes.
to change.
So,
Yeah, but you want to keep that next sentence that says, Mr. Spenlove responded, the city has great staff to work with.
I want to keep all the rest
Put
because I
that in
think it's
quotes, too.
important
Put
that that is
quotes.
on the record that he talked and
Was
talked.
that tongue-in-cheek?
That was not tongue-in-cheek. He was very, I mean, he was very complimentary of our staff. So I think we should definitely keep that.
Yeah.
But I think, do you need me to repeat it or, okay. I think that might just be better.
Okay.
We can underline and bold, great.
Yes, that's what we should make change to.
Anything else on page 6? Page 7. I just wondered about the statement, Corey, on line 43. He said he does not want to push the planning commission to make a decision. Is that what you said and meant? Because you're always pushing us to make a decision.
Yeah, what was the context on it? Because I think I did something that I don't want to, I mean, I push on the planning commission, but I don't want that push to not result in a decision that you're comfortable with.
Yeah, I think it was in making a decision that has not been thoroughly
Or a decision we're not
Vetted,
comfortable with.
yeah.
discussed do you want to add some language that has not been thoroughly
Analyzed and evaluated.
analyzed and debated? Okay with that change?
Yeah.
Anything else on page 7? Page 8. Page 9.
I had a couple of comments on page 9. I'm sure that this recorded exactly what I said, but I spoke a little inartfully. So starting with line 21, I don't like the phrase underparked. I know what I mean, but it is a little awkward. So let's have that say that the city, instead of is underparked, say lacks sufficient park space. With regard to the next sentence, she said it's easy for citizens to say they want to park, but stated that the city should not, and I did, I think, exactly say put that cost on the property owner, but again, I think we can make that sound better if we say expect the property owner to bear the cost of a park. Moving on to beginning with the sentence on line 26, Commissioner Hayman said she has heard conflicting ideas. Some citizens have expressed a desire to provide affordable housing to families. I would change and some to while others have said they do not want change, period. I did say that they don't want to open the community up to affordable housing to others, and I don't think that that's actually right. I mean, I'm sure that's exactly what I said, but I don't think that that is the main opposition to housing. I think that the opposition to housing is more that they like the community the way that it is and they don't want the community to change. So I want that to more accurately reflect what I had meant there. On line 31, Commissioner Hayman said Mr. Spendlove makes a good point in saying that dealing with redevelopment, yeah, I don't know, that struck me as kind of weird. I would take out that entire Commissioner Hayman said Mr. Spendlove makes a good point in saying that and just change it to saying given that the city is dealing with redevelopment. So that entire sentence would read, she has heard some citizens say the only thing acceptable would be single family homes on quarter-acre lots, but she does not feel that is viable given that the city is dealing with redevelopment in this area, period. On line 34, instead of higher, the point that I wanted to make there was that some people would rather see the property stay as it is rather than put in high or medium density housing. Because I think that there is a split there in terms of some people are not comfortable with high and some people are not comfortable even with medium, but both I think reflect the term density in some people's minds. And the last change, sorry, I made quite a few here. On line 39, she said she does not feel the public appreciates how difficult it is to balance the public opinion with property owner rights, which for the record, I do feel like that is a much harder determination than a lot of people think, but I don't know that we need to include that in our minutes. So I might just change it instead to say she observes it is difficult to balance public opinion with property owner rights and leave it at that. And that is it for my many changes. Thank you.
Any objections to those changes? I have one clarification on line 17. That sentence actually begins on 16. It should say the LDS Church last communication indicated that they would be willing to consider participation in creating green space. Anything else on page 9? Page 10?
I have.
Go ahead.
I have one thing that very similar to Commissioner Hayman. I probably said this word for word, but did not say it, but it was inartfully said. That's all he said. On line 30, well, it starts on line 30. The Planning Commission has taken time to analyze the situation and get public input on multiple angles to make sure they do not ram something down throats. And I don't think that ram something down throats is very artful. Again, it's probably exactly what I said, but to make sure they do not implement an incomplete plan is kind of a thought. I don't know a better way, if that's a good way to say it.
You
But-
just ended it, they have to get public input on multiple angles.
Great, I like that too. Let's put a period right there and strike the rest of the sentence.
Any other changes?
I have a few. On line 11, I'd like to just add clarity to that couple lines there. Commissioner Wright reminded the commission that Centerville lacks sufficient park space. I was going to say underparked, but I like how she said it there. And emphasized that she is pro-park of some sort. So pro-park is what it says, but I could change that if we don't want to say it that way. I was trying to keep it as much as possible like it was, but I'm pro-park of some sort. Or of some type, maybe might be better.
How about
Of some type.
She favors parks, a park of some type.
Favors parks of some type. How about that? But then I have my next sentence that uses favor, so I don't know if this is going to work. She is in favor of the city looking into budgeting options to pay for another park. So I don't want to just say I'm in favor of the city paying to have a park. I'm in favor into looking into budgeting options to pay for another park. Line 13. Starting with council, and then striking the next sentence, just continuing on and send it to the council and continue forward going through the public process. Instead of already gone through the public process, what that meant was that I was already gone through the first stages of the public process. I don't want to just say, oh, we've already gone through the public process and we haven't had a hearing or anything. I just want us to continue going through the public process. Continue forward. And then line 46, where it says Commissioner Wright said she would like to see commercial all along that portion. I want to say commercial options, or see options including commercial all along that portion. Just so that I don't necessarily definitely want to see commercial, but I just want to see options for commercial.
So options including commercial options.
Yes.
Is that it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Page 11. And page 12. Thanks for those comments. Chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that we accept the minutes as amended.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are adopted as amended. Thank you. All right, the next matter on the agenda is consideration of a proposed final site plan for an accessory building at 1215 West, 1850 North, initiated by Kathy Goodfellow and Mary Tullius. And this has also been scheduled for a public hearing. So turn the time to staff.
Thank you, Commissioners. All right, so this is the final site plan for the Goodfellow and Tullis Garage that was previously an unplatted parcel, and that they have combined with their lot and have chosen to put an accessory unit on the back of their land. So the site plan actually hasn't changed at all since conceptual. It has a little bit further detail to incorporate the drainage and the utilities on this plan, but the setbacks have remained the same and the architectural renderings have remained the same as well. They still have that temporary turnaround that was established by the Bleaks in partnership with the Bleaks and has been recorded. So not a whole lot of things to wrap up in the final site plan from conceptual. They just have to record their easements and go through the building permit process to just verify that all their development standards are in line with the residential zoning. So not a whole lot of changes from conceptual and a pretty straightforward report, I hope.
Thank
You
you.
guys have any questions?
Thank you, Cassie. Questions for staff?
Cassie, on the previous directives, after, I'm looking at number 2, it has complete, but then some question marks after complete. Has the city engineer reviewed the easement descriptions and deemed them acceptable?
Yeah, they have turned those into us and they just have to be reviewed and recorded with the county now.
Okay.
But I would suggest just an additional condition to make sure, so, because those PUEs need to be recorded before they get their building permit. So the engineer has reviewed, and there's just one correction on that. But I would just suggest adding a
Mr. Chair,
condition.
We just had a technical difficulty. The recording just stopped. Can we hold and
Let's just hold.
reestablish it?
Yep. See how big shorthand is. Get the court reporter.
Yeah.
Logan, tell me more about the eclipse.
Oh my word. Did anyone else go up and see that?
I did.
Yeah, that was, yeah, I don't even know what to say. It was incredible. Where
It
were
was
you at?
incredible.
Yeah.
We went to just below Green River Lakes in Wyoming.
Yeah,
We were going to go to Alpine,
yeah.
but my brother was like, oh, there'll be too much traffic.
We got out before it got too crazy.
Yeah.
How long
We
did
we
you guys
got
go?
out fast too.
We were quick. We probably were going through Alpine for about an hour, which should have taken 15 minutes, but it was some
Okay.
friends that were behind us by just maybe 5-10 minutes stretched, you know.
Yeah.
They were stuck an extra hour and a half, so
Oh, wow.
we snuck
Yeah,
out pretty quick, yeah.
fast.
An hour and a half on top of yours?
Yeah, and they were probably
Wow.
15 minutes behind us leaving, yeah.
Somebody went Lander area in Wyoming that I work with, and he said it took him 10 hours. It's a 5-hour drive.
Yeah, it took me 8 hours from Idaho Falls, which
Is that where
is
you went up
3
at?
hours.
Oh,
Yes.
Wow. 3 hours,
So
so
it was like,
tripled it.
a lot of people were doubling their travel.
oh, wow.
We traveled at the same speed, but we were kind of below Green River Lakes, and they said there were 3,000 people up in Green River Lakes.
Wow.
So we kind of like, were like, okay, everybody get in the car.
Well, it's supposed to go through, almost through the Salt Lake area.
Does ours work?
We'll all be old by then.
2045.
2045.
I mean, that'll be great.
I'll be living in Bermuda at that time, so.
You know, I was thinking,
It's
oh,
not
that's
that far
not
away.
that far away.
It's not that far away.
My sister-in-law is like right in the center of it in 2045, so she's already planning the party. And she said my brother will be 76, which means I'll also be in my 70s. I'm like, that's a long
It
ways
is away.
away.
But we could still be alive, right?
Yeah, I hope I am. I hope I get to see another one.
You know, I think I was most surprised. I didn't get to see the totality area. I was just in Salt Lake, but I was surprised at how appreciably cooler it got. I mean, you could really feel the temperature drop, which I was not expecting that. I was expecting to see the light.
And
but
also,
not.
could you believe how light it still was and how much of the sun was covered? Yeah.
Somebody told me that even 1% of the sun is still 100 times brighter than the moon. I don't know if that's true or not. I did not fact check that, but
That's crazy.
it sounds right given the 9% that I saw. That the light looked weird.
Yes,
it looked
it did.
weird,
Yes, it was
Eerie.
but
Okay, we're good.
Okay.
Back on the record. So Ms. Romney.
Oh, yes, I was just going to suggest a fourth condition, that the applicant shall provide a signed public utility easement to the city for recording prior to the building permit. And then we'll just remember to do that
Okay.
before the building permit.
All right, thank you for the input. Other questions for staff? Comments from staff? Would invite the applicant to come forward at this time. And please state your name and any comments to the staff report.
Hi, I'm Mary Tullius, one of the applicants, and we're just really excited to move forward with our project, and just want to say thanks again to the staff, the DRC staff, for their help in working through the challenges and the issues, even though there really weren't any, but we just appreciate their staff, their willingness to meet with us, and we had lots of good talks about it, so thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Any questions for the applicant? Thank you. This matter's been scheduled for public hearing. Invite anyone who would like to come forward at this time. Do so at one of the mics. Seeing no one coming forward, I'll close the public hearing. Any further comments or questions by the commissioners? If not, the chair will entertain a motion.
Chair, I hereby make a motion for the Planning Commission to approve the conceptual site plan, the final site plan, it says, sorry, I wrote that, final site plan for the proposed residential development for an unplatted parcel that has been combined with home located at 215 West, 1850 North, with conditions 1 through 3 in the staff report, and 4th added by Lisa, suggested reasons for the action 1 through 3 in the staff report.
So that condition 4 is that the applicant shall provide a signed public utility easement to the city for recording prior to the building permit.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or debate? If not, we'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Hammond?
Aye.
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 Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, so the next matter on the agenda is the consideration of a proposed planned development. Proposed plan development overlay amendment and amended conceptual site plan for Legacy Crossing located at 1222 Legacy Crossing Boulevard, initiated by JF Capital applicants. This has also been scheduled for a public hearing.
Hey, Dave, Mr. Chair, I think,
Yes.
is that item number 2? You might be reading item number 3.
Did I miss
Trying
one?
to skip ahead.
I think you skipped number 2.
Ah, my bad. Oh, you're right. You're right.
I also have a question. I'm trying to access this right now on the board view, and it says the item has been removed from the agenda.
I had to
Cover sheet.
refresh the page.
Okay.
Okay, that's probably what just popped off as well. So, okay, let's back up then. Item number 2 on the agenda tonight is
Great, thanks.
consideration of the proposal site plan and conditional use permit for the Bridge Community Church at 1284 West 75 North. This has also been scheduled for a public hearing. Staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you indicated, this is for the Bridge Community Church. Just a quick recap of history. They initially applied for a conditional use permit. During that first review, the commission tabled it. There were a number of items to discuss. I think the basic theme of that discussion was generated around parking. What was the actual calculation of parking, reconfiguration of the lot, and how do we address that? Because it involves changing the site, it does involve an amended site plan process. So you tabled the initial review of the conditional use permit and directed them to go forward in the amended site plan process. And if you recall, just shortly ago, the conceptual plan was submitted to you as part of that amendment to have the discussion about parking. I think that discussion resolved a lot of the count numbers, what applies and what doesn't apply to the church use. And so they have prepared their final site plan. which is part of securing the approval for the changes to the parking. And we're also bringing forward tonight again, the review of the conditional use permit. The purpose of the conditional use permit is that some uses are considered to potentially have impact, and during the CUP process, you have a chance to review that and determine what impacts are occurring and how they might be mitigated. So tonight, there's two motions if you're going to move forward with this, one for final site plan, one for the conditional use. As to the issue of the site plan, not much changes. I think we hashed out the elements of the parking. Remember, this is a site that has some nonconformities that are recognized by our code, but any change of use requires to at least address the parking. They have changed the dimensions, so it calls out, although there was space under the conceptual, now we have the 19-foot stalls and the 25-foot aisle widths, and before they had it, but it was a 20-foot stall and a 24-foot aisle width. So they've corrected that, and again, it reflects the counts that were discussed during your conceptual review. So staff is supportive of moving forward with the site plan. I'm sure the applicant doesn't want to move forward with the site plan unless they understand that their conditional use permit could be approved. And so I'll jump to the conditional use. Part of the discussion above and beyond the parking is the issue that we do have sufficient parking for the counts of the code for church use, but it is acknowledged in all of the applications that there might be some peak times, particularly on Sunday, which is an off day in this industrial area, to use some overflow parking. They have, again, as you're familiar with, they've secured some permission rights for adjacent property. The largest property is next door for an additional 30 stalls. So you have 35 plus 30, and they have anywhere from 50 to 60 cars. But they've also secured across the street a couple of properties for some minor parking accounts to handle the overflow. So we think that that does address the peak hour, which is likely a Sunday for their use, and it is an off day of the business use of the industrial park, so it seems feasible that they can mitigate that. The concern was brought up early on was the on-street parking. You know, the first is your counts can't use on-street parking, but that doesn't mean on-street parking can't happen. It's just the initial count has to be on the property. But the issue of 1250 West was brought up. We did discuss with you during the conceptual. The first review is talking with the police chief and the public works director, the adequacy of the roadways. They did not obtain written permission, but that was part of this long discussion. But we did sit down with the development review committee, talked with everybody, and our public works director, Randy Randall, did indicate that the 1250 West, this bountiful glass site to be reused as churches across from where there will be a legacy crossing storage. The legacy crossing storage is raw ground right now. They're under the way of entering construction, and there will be some additional road width and curb and gutter. But as of it sits today, any on-street parking on 1250 West would interrupt the travel lanes. At some point in the time in the future, that could be different. So staff did write the conditions of approval that the 1250 West would not be the place to be used for parking, but our local road, their parking lot, and the off-site secured neighbors would be sufficient in our mind for that. We did tie in our discussion of the conditional use permit a condition that talks about if this overflow parking of neighbors goes away, that the conditional use permit may be subject to city further review. Now, from my perspective, if one lot of the 4 stalls goes away, that's not rendering a use problematic. But if the major one next door no longer allows permission, it could interrupt some potential traffic problems. And so I'm trying to write a condition that covers that aspect. Is so long as this overflow is available, you're good to go. If it has a significant change and starts causing some problems, it's subject to come back to the commission to have a discussion about. So that's a unique way of ongoing condition about that overflow parking. But other than those elements, from our standpoint, We believe the site plan complies, the conditional use, the reconfiguring the parking, adding the stalls, have the off-site, it's the restriction of 1250 West, and the ongoing condition that if a significant amount of overflow goes away, it may be subject to further review. So we're recommending approval of both elements to you tonight.
Thank you, Corey. Questions for staff?
Yeah, Corey, regarding that point that you made at the end, let's say that a few years down the road, 2 of the 4 neighbors move and the new owners decide to not honor that parking agreement. It comes back to the Planning Commission and they conclude that you guys are underparked and we can't find parking anywhere. What would be the action that the city would take at that point?
Well, the issue is if they're unable to comply with the conditional use permit, they're subject to either complying with it or coming back and amending it. And I think you're right. There's a risk that if a significant amount disappeared and it was no longer available, it becomes a risk to them about that parking. Now, I wouldn't, from my perspective, go as far as that on-street parking conditions would change and maybe 1250 West changes and allows some on-street parking. But I do think you make a fair point that the approval comes with some element of risk to the user.
So in the event they can't meet it, the city would say, we revoke your conditional use and you thereby can't use this property as a worship service.
You're no longer mitigating your problem.
And they would lose because the worship service is the conditional use, right?
Yes, the actual use is it, so it'd be a loss of use, and yeah, that's an honest risk. But first of all, anybody gets a conditional use, it's always a risk, because if you can't comply with the conditions, it can be revoked. So there's an automatic risk there by default. The risk, I think, adds to this complexity that if some parking goes away, the on-street parking starts causing problems with traffic flow, then I think there's some risk that mitigating may be problematic. And I think that's the calculated risk they have to take is how comfortable do they feel they secure that, and are they in a position that if it did go away, are they going to maintain the use on the site with the potential revocation on their hands, or whether that would be time to move to another site or find another way. So, but you point out it's a risk.
Other questions for staff? Okay, we'd like to give the applicant an opportunity to respond to the staff report and also specifically to the conditions of the conditional use permit, which we really haven't discussed with the applicant previously. So please state your name for the record.
Yeah, my name is Lauren Pankratz, the pastor of the Bridge community, and grateful to be here with you guys all again today. This is my first time doing this process, and so I hope that I didn't get things out of order too much. I think that probably we've got things a little better on track now with the process and the way things have gone, but I apologize if our first step was not the right one and that put undue stress or anything on this process. But I appreciate staff working with us to make sure that we can get all of our things in order and put things in the right place at the right time. So I feel a lot better about where things are going right now, about our ability to make sure that our site conforms to the rules and regulations and all of that. I definitely understand, Logan, your point about what do we do. There's a church down the road in Bountiful that faces similar parking issues. They have enough on their minimums, but they don't have enough to actually meet the demand, and so they did find another lot maybe a half mile away that they help bus people in. I'm sure that we're creative and industrious enough to make sure that we can mitigate any future needs that we might have. My biggest concern has been making sure we meet the minimums, and as long as we do that, I know that we'll find creative ways to make sure we can get people parked appropriately. I do feel comfortable with the number that we have. I know, Corey, you mentioned the 30 that we have just right next door, but also the next lot over, which is still within that 500 feet, also has 20 spaces. And then there are, again, like you said, some across the street. And so there is a good deal of parking there. And if you've ever driven over there on a Sunday morning, you're not going to find any activity going on. And so I don't think there will be an actual parking issue. One of our biggest issues from our standpoint will be helping people make sure they know where the closest available spot is, just from a hospitality standpoint. And so we're going to have a team of people who are out there making sure we can get people safely to the next available spot that's the closest. And so, you know, that's something that we want to do a good job at for those visitors or guests that come. I think someone had mentioned last go round, I was able to just to kind of, I wasn't able to be here during the conceptual plan, but did hear some questions about snow removal and things like that. And I don't know if that's still on your mind, but because I'd heard that, I did go and check with our neighbors, and they're completely happy with us plowing if need be on a Saturday night or Sunday morning, just to make sure that our lots are available and ready for use for those people coming to church on Sunday morning. Do you have any other questions for me at this time before I sit down?
I was actually going to raise the snow removal. So you would undertake that on
We
your
would,
own?
yep.
You don't have agreements with your neighbor or have a third-party service company doing that?
No, we have a truck and a plow, and so we'll take care of our lot. And we asked if there'd be a problem if we take care of theirs in the need. It's not overly typical that we have a big storm on a Saturday night where crews don't get out, but in that case, we did have that once this last year, where we showed up to church on Sunday morning and our lot wasn't ready to go at Christmas time. I don't know.
So did every other church in the valley. Right?
So in that instance, you know, we'll be able to take care of that in house, but also take care of that for our neighbor as well. And he was fine with that as long as we were willing to, you know, take that responsibility on ourselves. He was more than happy.
Thank you. Other questions for the applicant? Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
This matter has been scheduled for a public hearing. Anyone wishing to come forward at this time may do so. Seeing no one coming forward, I'll close the public hearing. Any further questions by the commissioners of staff or the applicant?
I have one for staff, Corey. In the conditional use permit, condition number 4, if the overflow parking allowances as outlined in the petitioner's submittal are rescinded by any owner, the CUP approval is subject to further reconsideration by the city. Is that staff or back to the planning commission?
It would be back to the planning commission. Staff cannot approve amended conditional use permit.
Okay. And then, so the same would be for number 5, unless otherwise approved in the future by the city, that would be planning commission.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions for staff? Very good. Chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I hereby make a motion for the Planning Commission to approve the final site plan amended for the Bridge Community Church use, subject to conditions 1 through 3 in the staff report and suggested reasons for actions A through C.
I second.
Okay. And as was previously noted, we have 2 matters on the table for this particular item, so this is the first of 2 motions. Any further discussion or debate on the motion pertaining to the final site plan?
I think they've done everything that we've, I guess, more for the CUP, discussion about CUP, but I think they've done all of the things that we've asked them to do. They've mitigated any concerns we've had, addressed those concerns, and I feel really comfortable moving forward.
Yeah, as do I. However, I wanted to make sure that it was perhaps on public record that in our discussions about the parking ratios required for these uses, it seemed apparent to me that perhaps our ordinances were a little weak in that regard or didn't quite flesh out this scenario.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want that to be noted and perhaps considered in the future. I don't know how high that would rank on our other planning priorities, but I still am in support of this final site plan approval.
Well, and Logan, to that point, for this, I think we discussed that not only for this specific use, but for all church parking, we have a very, very much an overflow issue that happens. So if it's something that is, you know, important enough, you could make a suggestion to consider that.
Yeah, I don't know that I do it as part of this motion, or if
Okay.
I just pull Corey aside and give him a lecture later. But
There you go.
Okay, any other debate or comment? If not, let's go ahead and vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
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 Motion on the final site plan is approved. We now move to the conditional use approval or motion. Any further discussion before a motion is made on that? Chair will entertain a motion. Would the commission like to hear from the applicant on the conditional use permit? Any objection?
No.
No.
Please.
Could I ask if on number 5 there, if it would be appropriate to add an expiration on that restriction for when that street is finished? Just so that that's not something I have to come back to the commission to ask. If that's the intent, that we restrict that because of the narrowness due to the unfinished side, if maybe we could just kind of write that in.
Well, I understand that from their way of thinking, and you could certainly, say, or otherwise deemed by this future of the city, or, public works director and city engineer. The hesitancy I have, just from my perspective, is that you do have possibility of on-street parking for 1250 West, but if you remember, we also have the storage sheds and the apartments and the wintertime parking that's going on sometimes along 200 North. And so I think needs to be a better evaluation that as that opens up, what ability and feasibility of its use is there. So I'd hate to say a deadline and then it just opens it up carte blanche.
Well, the only thing I would say into that, though, is with the part with the storage sheds, we specifically asked for the opening of the storage sheds to be off of 1250, so there's not going to be any parking along that, right?
Right, but
So that wouldn't be,
yeah, it's just something I'm trying to reserve in a conservative way, that there's a possibility that regular on-street parking is available, but I would hate that to be tied to the permit if there's other impacts that should be looked at at the time that the app becomes available. I'm not saying there is, I'm just being very conservative with saying, if you have all of this other parking, let's use it. And if there's a need that comes about or opens up, it can be re-looked at if need be. But to have an expiration means basically just said, go ahead. And I think a conditional use is narrowed to the use and its impacts, and we should be cautious about opening it up for something that may cause a problem and we've lost the ability to mitigate it.
so just refresh us, on-street parking is not prohibited unless it's specifically in the CUP. So what we're really doing is we're taking the ability of them to park, right, on street?
For 1250 West,
Yeah.
because it's inadequate right now.
So,
But if it were to be adequate, there would be no reason to prohibit them from parking along 1250.
Not necessarily, because an example that I can think of is that you have problems with the old Pioneer Nursery site, the outdoor area, and the parking of the use across the street, which is the dental offices, parking up and down the residential neighborhood. And even though that's allowed to on-street parking by right, those interaction of those uses was creating problems for the neighborhood. I don't anticipate necessarily that's repeated here. I'll give that to you. But because that future's not here, I'm trying to be conservative and say, if it becomes available, we'll look at how to make that available. But if this use still continues to create a problem, like the interface of the nursery site and the dentist office, I don't want to give that up from my perspective, because that's what the purpose of the CUP is for.
I'm not sure it's necessary, though, that it go through the entire approval process back to this commission.
Right, and that's
for
right,
example,
and that's
and
otherwise
so
approved by the
we-
city.
We could be more specific as to what that approval would entail.
Yes,
Which would be
yes.
sign off by the engineer and public works director, and leave
Or,
it at staff
or
level.
commission, whatever's the appropriate method.
So my question is kind of along those lines, well, kind of. So when Google drove by there in May of 2016, there were no signs or red curb or anything like that. Does the city plan to put signs up or put a red curb up there to indicate that parking is not allowed? Because the average parishioner does not read the CUP or. the
Right,
sign.
and that's the obligation of the user and owner of the CUP is to be responsible for making that happen. Because you're right, the average person doesn't know that, so part of their discussions and communications should outline that to all their user or parishioners.
So they'd have to put up their own signs essentially.
No, they don't
Can
put
they
up
do
the
that?
signs on the street. They instruct them it's a prohibited use, but right now you can't park there anyway.
Okay, so then what if somebody is visiting the future storage units and they decide to park there? Looks like a parishioner, not a parishioner. Now are we getting the church in trouble for something that?
The issue will be is once a problem is, the staff is obligated to go and investigate and find a discovery of that problem. And again, if there's a user creating a problem above and beyond the demand of normal public street parking, because it's a demand that's causing problems, we want to maintain the ability to mitigate that.
Corey, can you just explain again the reason why you feel like it should be prohibited? And so maybe what we could do is take that reason and specifically put it in there, and not have a date, but have it so that we are specific on why the reason is that it's prohibitive. And then if that reason is removed, then there's no date
Yeah.
requirement. It's just automatic. The reason is resolved, and then they
If
get
you're
their
comfortable
thing.
with that, right now, the inadequacy is that 1250 West is not finished. So there's not sufficient width to have parking and travel lanes. So until across the street develops and installs their curb and gutter and puts the additional pavement in, we don't have, it's insufficient to park on 1250 West. That's the reason. If you're comfortable that once that opens up and it just goes to town and whatever happens, understand you've lost any ability to further mitigate.
So if we were to perhaps put something in that says until 1250 West is completed or finished, I don't know the language for that.
But I think what Corey's saying is that let's take the scenario that 1250 West is built out to handle parking. What he's saying is we still want the ability under the conditional use permit to look at this particular user and say, should they really just be opened up to that parking?
Particularly when you've made the early discovery that may not be by the majority that our ordinance has fallen short.
Well, and also, I mean, my main concern is because yes, on-street parking, people can use that generally, but remember that, you know, we're looking at the parking as part of the CUP. And if they are required to provide all of their required parking on site. So I think that there is a legal nexus there for analyzing and providing an additional restriction on 1250 West, even if it was improved fully. And I think that the city has to analyze that for all uses for 1250 West as a collector. So
I'd like to actually push back a little bit on the idea that there's not enough room there to park on 1250 West, because so on the east side of 1250 right there, looks like a dirt shoulder, and then you got asphalt, and then there is a curb on the curb and gutter on the west side. So from the edge of the asphalt, the dirt shoulder, to the curb is 36 feet plus or minus, right? Because it's inaccurate on here, but 36. And in some of our previous discussions about lane width, travel width, and whatever else, you know, if we would go with our conservative 11 or 12 feet wide, there's enough room there for
Yeah, if you
a center
want,
lane and
yeah,
two.
this is coming from your staff as a public works director. It's not me making it up. He felt it's inadequate at this time. If you want to override that opinion, you feel free to, but I caution you about it.
well, and our public works director is actually here if you'd like to.
Sure, why don't you
Hear
come
from him.
forward, Randy, and do it on the record.
Sure.
You know, this is probably good to talk to you about this. We're actually meeting with West Bountiful. West Bountiful has come to us and asked to go into a joint venture of widening the street and providing access all the way from there to Parish Lane so that their people can walk and ride bikes. My concern is, what if we want to put bike lanes in? What if we want a center lane and we don't want parking along 1250? So it's just like Main Street. Main Street has changed dynamically by putting bike lanes on the side, and some places we don't want cars to park where we're having bike lanes. That's a main thoroughfare for West Bountiful to travel to Parish Lane. So I think we need to hold back and be able to say, we may not want parking there, but we might want bike lanes. We may want a center medium for turning within that radius. Those streets going east and west are actually wider than a city street because we actually only maintain 3 feet on each side. We don't have sidewalks, so we've made the asphalt very wide. So east and west is a great place for them to park in an overflow situation. Personally, I think it's better for us to not even encourage them to do that. The police chief, for example, can come to us and require us to put up no parking signs. So for us to give them that permission, theoretically we can't, because there are people who have that jurisdiction and can put them up for reasons that the city needs to do. So allowing a private group to utilize it for that purpose is probably not appropriate. Allowing them to use it on the other street, I don't see a long-term problem, but I really do along 1250 West, because we're trying to work with West Bountiful. You get a much better corridor for both bicycles, foot traffic, and transportation, which may include a center medium turn lane, especially where that intersection goes east and west or east to the other piece of property. So it would be my suggestion that we not encourage them to think to the future they may be able to use it for parking.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Endel? One thought I had too is we're going to be looking at that West Centerville area at some point in the future. We don't know what development plans or zoning or changes to the general plan we all may be discussing down there, but I would really, I think I would tend to take the conservative approach here until we know what else is going to be going down there, because it may not be as quiet as Sunday down there at some point as it is now.
I am convinced.
Would anyone like to make a motion regarding the conditions, or should we move forward? See nobody stepping up.
I can make
You can make a motion on the CUP?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm just getting back to it. I'll make a motion for the Planning Commission to approve the conditional use permit for the Bridge Community Church use, subject to the following conditions, 1 through 5 in staff's report, with the suggested reasons for action A through G.
Second.
And moved and seconded. Any further comment or debate?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion, an amendment to number 5, that we change that from reading on-street parking for this use is prohibited on 1250 West unless otherwise approved in the future by the Community Development Director instead of city.
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded.
What if we add or Public Works Director?
Yeah, I'll accept that, by Community Development Director and Public Works Director.
And or and?
Or.
I'm going to say and.
And.
Okay. I'll still support that.
Okay, we have an amendment to the motion. Any further discussion or debate on the amendment?
Can I just clarify that? So the amendment is to take out the city, or to leave in the city and add and the Community Development Director or Public Works Director?
Remove the city and
Remove the
leave
city.
Community Development Director and Public Works Director.
What if we left city and then we put or? Would you feel comfortable with that, or you feel comfortable already still with it?
Well,
It honestly doesn't matter to me, because I am not comfortable with the amendment. I would leave it as just the city for the reasons that Corey has articulated. I tend to take the conservative approach on this one.
Okay, any other comments or debate on the amendment? Let's bring the amendment to a vote. Do roll call. Commissioner Hayman?
Nay.
Aye.
No.
No.
aye.
Aye.
So it fails.
So it fails.
Fails. Okay, Back to the primary motion with condition number 5 remaining unchanged. Any further discussion or debate? If not, we'll vote on the motion. Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion is approved. Thank you very much.
Appreciate the promotion, though.
Yeah, I was trying to, I don't even, never mind, yeah.
Now we'll move to item number 3. Get my computer to work here. Okay, item number 3 is consideration of a proposed plan development overlay amendment and amended conceptual site plan for Legacy Crossing at 1222 Legacy Crossing Boulevard. JF Capital applicant. Turn the matter over to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. I'll give you a little bit more than what's in the staff report because it's hard to write everything that is going on. In general, the staff report is correct. They would like to amend the exhibits or the PDO approval for Legacy Crossing and the associated exhibits, particularly the parking and the cross access. The overall theme would be is that lots 2 and 3 to the south would be removed from the overall required flat count for the project. Early understanding of staff is the owners of those properties have been significantly marketing those properties. They are looking at alternatives for those lots, and they're not necessarily yet independent of the project. That may be also a future consideration. But there's a lot of obligation of that lot 2, which is the former restaurant pad. There's a lot of extra parking sitting in those 2 lots to make up for parking that's remaining on the larger portion of the project that you're familiar with. So part of their goal is if we can take away the flat rate count, the hard count for everybody, and allow a cross-use count, that opens up the ability that the rest of the project is not overutilizing lots 2 and 3, and lots 2 and 3 might have additional flexibility to be adapted to what the market might respond to. So that's the overall theme of the amendment. The other amendment is lot 4, which is if you recall in your minds, you have the large office building, you have the Wright development offices, you have the Tuller printing, you have the dermatologist building and 3 tenant spaces in there. That's all of lot 4. All of lot 4 has undergone some sublot development, so there's lots 4A, 4B, C, and D. And what is happening is that those uses under the current master plan are running short of the required parking. So to finish out the tenant space of the dermatologist building and to add another office building, it relies on lots 2 and 3 to get to that hard count. So they're running out of space. So in running out of that space, they said, well, what can we do? Because the second office building's not quite ready to go yet. Lots 2 and 3 look like to be a long horizon future development, and we're running out of space for the larger project as well as some of the tenant. And so it comes down to the method that they chose is a parking modification for their mixed use. And that parking modification is saying we're a mixed use project. Please consider the uses on the site, the hours of operation, and let us cross use individual stalls. Instead of a flat count, everything for the theater, everything for the office. Their particular focus is let's look at the office uses, which have changed. There's not as much retail as originally planned. Office was allowed, but retail's kind of not been fruiting itself. So let us use the theater, which is prominently at night, and the office, which is prominently during the day, because a lot of people are not using that northwest section. It's usually open a lot of the time. So everybody's using the convenient spots, and nobody's using what's available necessarily in that corner. And so what they'd like to do is amend it so they can have this cross-hour access. That frees up some counts for the sublots of 4. They don't have to rely on 2 to make it up. And it also allows the future office, which they think is coming in the near future, that when it gets built, it doesn't have to borrow from Lot 2 also. So Lot 2 could be used potentially for something else. So they engaged a traffic study, Reeves and Reeves, looked at the traffic. By the time you sort out the numbers, when you actually read the report, they're trying to address the current shortage of Lot 4 and the long-term use of the entire project. But the amendment will just be for the project. That'll free both elements up. What they're saying in their report is that the highest demand, if I get this right, is at 9 p.m. So there is some trade-off, but the highest demand, the peak number of parking that's taking place is at 9 p.m. And that the development without lots 2 and 3 would still have over 200 stalls available in a cross-hour use. And so they would like to seek that opportunity to do that, because originally you're about 93 over for the whole project, but you're borrowing again for lots 2 and 3. This would now totally eliminate the need for lots 2 and 3 for spillover and rely just on the project that you see built using cross-hour use, and they still should have sufficient parking. Now, that's not to say that where people like to park is solved. That's still, they'll drive through the parking lot, it'll be packed, and they'll have to end up in the northwest corner. So we're not solving where people like to park, but we are solving the demand of parking. We discussed this down at the Development Review Committee. You know, there's some of us that say, should we have it checked? I don't think, from my perspective, there was a consensus with everybody having Reeves and Reeves just peer checked, you know, with it. Our ordinance doesn't really call for a peer checking unless you think there's some serious doubts and want to have it peer checked. So we looked at it from our standpoint of bumping this to the Planning Commission and see if you feel comfortable with the study. Now, just my take on the study, not the rest of the city staff. Reeves and Reeves has done the traffic study for the Maverick. We had that traffic study peer reviewed. Other than talking about shortening the islands at the roundabout, the peer review from A-Trans agreed with Reeves and Reeves. So that is a place where I feel comfortable that Reeves and Reeves is doing some professional studies. Another place that Reeves and Reeves has done some studies is the infamous Brighton Hafoka property project on Porter. There was a required study, and Reeves and Reeves submitted that and said the demand of the travel from the project is not where your problem is. It's not at the project, it's not at 400 West, and so there should be sufficient capacity for the project. We had that peer reviewed by A-Trans. The city has used A-Trans often as a peer review. A-Trans came back and said, yes, Reeves and Reeves right. It's no problem. It's not a problem with the project. It's not a problem at 400 West. Your real problem is the commercial development at Bolano Way is where you're really having a problem with traffic. And so once again, A-Trans agreed with Reeves and Reeves. So at this point in time, I'm apt to say they've sufficiently studied it. There's sufficient evidence from my standpoint that they've been good on their traffic studies. And unless you have some doubts or you prefer not to allow the cross-access use or cross-hour use, I think you can debate that. The other amendment that would take place is the cross-access agreement. We talked about, you do have spillover drive aisles onto lots 2, particularly lot 2 from the theater lot. We don't want to lose that cross-access agreement and be able to complete those aisles so nobody puts in a fence or a wall and blocks those off. They are keeping the cross-access agreement in place with those, but they're reformatting it, and I don't recall all the legal reasons, but we're reformatting it to meet the traffic study exhibit if you so inclined to recommend approval and if the city council says yes to it. So our recommendation is to accept the modification and let them amend their PDO and take it to the city council.
So Corey, that same question had occurred to me that you just addressed, and that is, it doesn't really change any of the current cross-access agreements, or those will be integrated into this,
Yes.
this project-wide parking, because it's really a risk that goes both ways. I mean, the next blockbuster movie that comes along, some parking's going to be lost
Yep.
for those office buildings.
Yes,
And they need to recognize, of course, that
Yes.
that could occur.
yes.
Thankfully, those aren't happening as much as they used to. That's just-
But along those lines, basically, when that next blockbuster movie comes along, at worst, it's 294 spots, right?
Yes, you'd have to be super blockbuster maybe.
And they added in the new office building?
Yes.
bid? Okay.
Yes.
Other questions for staff? Would like to invite the applicant to come forward at this time and respond to the staff report or answer questions. Please introduce yourself at the podium.
Glenn Gersberger from JF Capital, one of the applicants. No, I think Corey articulated that quite well. It's a fairly complicated issue, and trying to get everyone on the same page has been a bit of a challenge. But I think that what the study shows, and I think what Corey he touched on it, but what the study also showed was that in this area where the new office building is planned, there's currently no parking spaces there now. But once we build that building, there'll be, according to the study, in excess of 118 spaces just in that area. So I think everyone benefits from cross parking by use versus by peak demand. So, and I think also the other item that came up out of the study too was that during Monday through Friday, during the office hours of 8 o'clock till 6 o'clock, there's an average of 685 stalls in excess in those areas. So if you drive over there during the daytime, you see just a sea of asphalt that's unused. So making the changes that we're proposing, I think, makes a lot of sense for the use that's in place and anticipated down the road. So,
Thank you. Questions for the applicant? Thank you very much. This matter is scheduled for public hearing. I'd like to open the public hearing at this time. Anyone who wishes to speak on this matter may come forward at this time. Seeing no one coming forward, we'll close the public hearing. Further discussion and debate by the commissioners.
Corey, to help me sort of wrap my mind around this, can you just give me some hypotheticals of before and after?
Okay. Before, we master planned things on what the developer thought might go in, but we didn't tie it to just those particular ideas. An example is that the office spaces have changed in their process on the original configuration. And so you do see a new layout of parking compared to the new or the old exhibit based on that some of the configuration and the footprints of the buildings have changed. We still maintain the counts. The before is that there was sufficient parking for what they thought was going to go into place in excess. Once lots 2 and 3 developed, they actually were overparked. I know we're working about the underparked word, but this is instead of parking, instead of parks. They were actually overparked by 93 if everything built out. The problem with the build out is lots 2 and 3 are coming online much, much, much slower. And so the area in demand is on a hard count
So you're
coming up
saying
short.
phase 2 and phase 3 are lots 2 and 3?
Yes, correct. And so I think the before is that based on the expected uses, we were going to be overparked based on the current uses, they could still meet the demand of parking if Lot 2 and 3 develop. But the example of today is that the dental office wants to build a third suite tenant space, and between that and the other office and the office building they want to build, it now comes up short until 2 comes online. And I've been the bad person saying, we'll let you get to this point, don't go any further. Now we'll let you get to this point, don't go any further. Well, now we can't go any further, and it's been frustrating. What the cross hour does is it says, look, you're not only over parked on the flat rate, take out lots 2 and 3 and the hour rate. If you cross use those on the hours, you're way over parked because of the type of uses that did come in. And so the exhibit's changing where lots 2 and 3 will develop on their own merit and their counts, but lots 2 and 3 are not needed to finish out the rest of the phases. I don't know if that makes sense, but.
That makes more sense, thanks.
Corey, I have a question for you. You've indicated that with the cross parking, there will be adequate parking, but that it may not be preferred parking, which I thought was a very artful term. So when I have been in this area, I've noticed that there is a lot of cars that are parked along this Legacy Crossing Boulevard.
Mm-hmm.
If we are reducing the number of stalls, is staff concerned that that's going to encourage more on-street parking there? And does staff have any concerns about the on-street parking that happens there at the Legacy Crossing Boulevard?
Yeah, I can share some thoughts with you. You know, the first element if you want to point to a design flaw and simplify it and say a design flaw, you know, one of the design flaws that would look at is that the apartment units, many of them had to have a second stall, and that second stall is not on the apartment unit site. The second stall is shared into the commercial area. The original thought pattern of the project that you kind of look back, things that make you go, is that the second stall was to be on the east side of the residential units, between the theater, the little plaza and the theater and the residential units. Well, unfortunately, that becomes the favorite spot for the theater goers and everybody else too. So this second stall has created the angst in the parking there. And there's 2 places. It first began with the Legacy Boulevard, which is on the north side of the apartment buildings, the private road. They began to park all over that road. And in snow, and the way the snow was removed, half the cars are out into the travel lanes, and it started creating some problems with folks. That was resolved by painting better snow removal in the private realm of their street, and painting a red line on the commercial side, the north side of that privacy, and leaving the on-street parking on the Legacy Boulevard. But that's not a lot of parking. So where you're seeing the parking is coming out onto the public street on the south side of the apartment units. They're parking on that street because that's the convenient location to get to and from the units, and that's where you can still park on that street. The thought pattern about that street, I think you heard it from Randy, that's a really wide street compared to city standards. So the on-street parking, other than the entrance for the Legacy storage, is not really problematic from a parking standpoint. It's just the places that the residents like to park because competing elsewhere is not very fun. I'm not as worried from the perspective of on-street parking there because it's an extra wide street. We'll be able to get our travel lanes through there. And if people want to have park there, that's okay. Where the problem arises is the wintertime parking for plowing the roads and the streets. That's where your current police chief is trying to weigh through that as people park here and then the car's there for 2 days because it's their second stall and they don't use the car. And so we do have a problem with some of the on-street parking, but it's made up for inconveniently into the commercial areas of the lot. The other thing, and this is me completely editorializing, so take it for fun and toss it out as soon as you're done hearing it. this was originally designed because we were looking at a format of transit-oriented development. We had apartment units that are different than Centerville has seen. There's stacked flats, they're 4 stories, they have elevators, they're indoor accesses. And I think from our standpoint, the idea of a related transit-oriented design, now this isn't for bus rapid transit, light rail, and even the front runner at this point. This is an idea that people can eliminate a car and they have ability to get on the freeway and get off and conveniently, and hopefully the type of style of housing doesn't promote people owning 4 and 5 cars living here. The problem that has occurred when it was originally marketed, they were told they had 2 stalls. People did bring in 2 cars, and I think that's somewhat of a lifestyle change. As you find difficulties of parking, it becomes less likely to somebody who owns 3 cars to try to rent here, and maybe somebody that is maybe down to a car will develop over time and be more of that transit kind of expectation. It's a 1 car, not an apartment complex to have 3 cars on. I do know a person that owns 3 cars living there, and so 2 of them are really inconvenient for them. So hopefully as lifestyle and the market and people look for places, they realize this is not a product to have a bunch of cars. They may not, because we're short sometimes with housing. They may not. But I think that's the concept. And, I know this is controversial, but I always stick my neck out. Front runners along here. Someday it'll be electrified so that they can run trains on a dual track or off-hour peaks. If West Centerville and this neighborhood's re-looked at, maybe not as intense as it was before, it's a good place for transit in some type to land there and be there if we do additional development. And I know that that's not people's future today, but think about 20 years. And I think electrifying the front runner is a little longer horizon plan. And if this neighborhood can be viable and stay intact, I think you will grow the car demand is going to reduce from the apartment units. And we can rely more and more that the commercial will take care of itself. The last thing, this is way out there, congestion's good. It's hard for people to want, but congestion is good. Legacy Boulevard, you should not be going to the theater 5 minutes late and racing down at 45 miles an hour down that private lane. On-street parking congestion slows you down, a little more dangerous. You have a tendency to slow down. It calms traffic. It doesn't take away the congestion maybe and the road rage because you're late to your movie, but it is a traffic calming, and to be honest with you, we designed the project to have that congestion. People don't like it, understood, but it was designed to have that congestion. And that maybe is a second design flaw. So there's my editorializing, sorry.
Thank you, Corey.
Well, Corey, to follow up with that, I know it was designed to be, I understand the process of designing that Legacy Boulevard to be that way so that it does act as a slowing and traffic calming. I just want to make sure that I'm hearing you correctly. So right now, we have a lot of people parking along the street and in areas that they want to park that maybe are not the most beneficial for them to park. And the office building is not being built out because it requires more parking to have that approved. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying? The dentists and stuff?
Yeah, depending on their uses. I mean, if you ask the dermatologist, their position is that our hard count for them is more parking than they actually use. So one of the routes they could have come in is reduced it for their use. But this benefited everybody as a whole. It benefited lots 2 and 3 to be adapted differently, potentially, allows the office building that's unbuilt right now to come in and adjust its sizing, and allows the dentist office to, or dentist, we have a lot of dentists, dermatologist office to finish out their tenant suite, because they do feel that their hard count required doesn't match what their actual use is. Their actual use is less.
So hypothetically, to change the parking, this would allow the office building to go in, which would bring more parking, but also just a synergy of things happening there.
Is synergy to complete the project
To complete it.
and allow lots in 2 and 3 to either merit out on themselves and not hold up everybody else and wait for that time frame for it to merit out, or they've talked about transitioning it to maybe the different uses than what were planned, which is a medium box and a restaurant.
Right. So we're not taking the parking away necessarily, the overall, but we're just making it so that these things can occur in a synergistic way.
Yes, and that the cross use is available because the theater is a heavy anchor use for
Great.
that hour use, that off-hour use.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or for staff? All right, Chair will entertain a motion.
I hereby make a motion for the Planning Commission to recommend to the City Council to approve the petition to amend the Legacy Crossing at Parish Lane Development's PDO approval as outlined in items 1 through 5 in the staff report with suggested reasons for action A and B.
Second.
And moved and seconded. Any further comment or debate? Not, we'll go ahead and take a vote. Commissioner Hammond?
Aye.
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 Motion is approved. Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is the consideration of the proposed final site plan for the Quick Quack Car Wash. Again, I've been practicing that. Quick Quack Car Wash at 518 North, 400 West. Dallas Hakes applicant, and we'll turn the time over to staff.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this is the Quick Quack Car Wash that is located north of the Dairy Queen on Parish Lane and south of the Colonial Lumber on 400 West. And their conceptual site plan was approved just about maybe a month ago, and it has changed quite a bit since then, so I'll catch you up on those changes first. So they do have a boundary line adjustment to the north on the north end of their property where Colonial Lumber will be taking over most of this private drive. And that is in the process as this goes through final site plan. Also, UDOT and the city have expected to expand 400 West for quite some time. So Quick Quack has gone ahead and accommodated that expansion of 400 West into their site plan so they don't have to do it in a few years. And so that involved a taking of anywhere from 13 to 25 feet along the side of 400 West. So there, I can show you later, but takes up a good amount of their west side of the property, so they went ahead and included that taking into their site plan now just to be proactive and plan ahead of time so they don't have to rip out all their curb and gutter and landscaping in just a few years' time. So that did limit their site plan from the original conceptual site plan quite a bit with the changes to the north and the west. So it's a much tighter of a site plan than they originally expected. And then on top of that, you guys put them in the Parish Lane design guidelines, so that has changed things a little bit as well. So let me just bring up my staff report here. So the biggest issues with the landscaping on 400 West, so between the staff and the city, this dual access between Dairy Queen that they've accommodated. They've combined driveways with Dairy Queen, and that is a benefit to both the city and the site. It's going to slow down traffic of the cars that are traveling cross parcel between the Jiffy Lube and all those other sites to the east, and also accommodate for more stacking for the Dairy Queen and just slow traffic generally on 400 West. So that's a big plus for the traffic on this site. And then we have the landscaping issues on 400 West. So they had quite a bit of taking in their west side, and then they're in the parish lane design guidelines. So I can show you just the, so this is just the shaded part is what their taking would be from their original parcel to their current one. And the parish lane design guidelines require a 20-foot landscaping buffer, of which is included a 15-foot berm and then a sidewalk and then a 7-foot buffer on the other side of that sidewalk. So it's about 30 feet of landscaping and sidewalk and buffer between the site and the road. So that's quite a bit of landscaping, and not every site on Parish Lane even accommodates all of that. Usually it's just the sidewalk right up next to the road and then a 20-foot landscaping buffer, and that's been negotiated with UDOT for those reasons. So it should be noted that not a lot of the sites on Parish Lane follow the Parish Lane design guidelines in terms of landscaping to a T every time. But in this case, it's quite restricted and quite limited in terms of what they offered in landscaping. Right now they have a 6-foot sidewalk and then a 6-foot park strip, which obviously is nowhere close to the 20-foot landscaping that would be required under the Parish Lane design guidelines. And staff wants to be flexible and accommodate some leniency in terms of a 20-foot landscaping buffer and a 15-foot berm. Due to the restrictions on the site and the widening of 400 West, we would like to be accommodated as well and be flexible with that. But as I brought up in my staff report, 400 West is considered a collector street, and just in our standard development standards for zoning, we require a 15-foot landscaping buffer from the back of curb. So a 6-foot sidewalk usually, and then anywhere from 8 to 10 feet of landscaping buffer in between that and the site. So they didn't even quite meet that. It's just right now 12 feet as a landscaping strip. So our recommendation in terms of the landscaping buffer is to push that to 15. And that not only gives us a little bit more room for the pedestrian lights that they've included and a little bit more room for trees. 8 feet is the recommended size of a park strip, just in order not to interfere with the sidewalks and then trees. And they do need a few more trees from their landscaping plan in order to accommodate the 6 trees that they need for frontage anyway. So that's just our recommendation for right now, because we understand that 20 feet in this area is quite a lot, but the typical standards are 15, and we think that that's doable for this site. The other issues in terms of the Parish Lane design guidelines are the colors and materiality of the architecture. Let me find their elevations. So as you've seen, got photos, in their other sites, they have a bright, cheerful yellow. This is some photos of what they are proposing right now. And typically in the past, Parish Lane design guidelines have just incorporated muted primary color tones, and almost all, I think literally all of them on Parish Lane design guidelines incorporate some type of rock or stone into the architecture, whether it's just the bottom half or into the pillars or an entire face of the building, but almost all of the buildings on Parish Lane have a rock or stone theme to their building, and muted primary colors. And Quinquac's architectural proposals do not incorporate any stone into their design as of right now. And the colors are up for debate, as the applicant has offered quite a few in the application. So that can be up to you as to what is muted. And those are our main concerns from the Parish Lane design guidelines, incorporating the harmonious colors and materiality of the building itself, and also incorporating as much as we can into the landscaping and the streetscape, because that's a huge part of the design guidelines, to have those pedestrian streetlights, and they did include stamped concrete and the crosswalks, and as much as they could. It's just the landscaping buffer that is the real issue here because of the widening, because of the taking on 400 West. They are feeling a little squeezed, but I feel like it's not unreasonable to just push them to the typical development standard of 15 feet. And let me just think of any other issues that are in my report. But I think I covered most of the things. Do you guys have any questions that you can think of?
Questions for staff?
So by pushing it to the 15-foot, can you tell me how that would change this site plan?
We are thinking that everything would be pushed back on the site 3 feet.
So there's enough room at the back for them, the grass on the back?
Yeah.
Okay.
So just everything
Just
scooched
moving.
over
So
anywhere from 2 to 3 or 2 to 5 feet. Yeah.
Okay.
Cassie, have you had any discussions with the applicant why they opted not to include stone or rock similar to the other buildings along the parish lane?
I have not. I think they were more preoccupied with the colors, but it could be up for debate as well.
Other questions for staff? Let's turn some time over to the applicant if they'd like to respond to the staff report and to perhaps answer questions. Please come forward.
Cassie forgot the best part. Recommend site approval, right?
True. That's true. With conditions. There are conditions in there.
Yes, absolutely.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Good to be with you again. Staff, thanks for working with us. And as far as the rock and stone.
Could you just state your name for the record? Just for the
Joseph Ernest, for and on behalf of Quick Quack Development. Good to be with you again. We're kind of going to revisit some of the topics we did before, only because to us there are 3 of the conditions that are crucially important to us, and I hope to provide context why that's the case. I hope to make it seem reasonable why it's so important to us. Cassie made it sound maybe not that reasonable. I hope we are. On motion 2, number 4A and B, I'm going to talk about the muted tones, and I'm going to talk about the rock or stone. The rock or stone, until I got the staff report, it wasn't something that we weren't very aware of that non-compliance, just to be frank with you. But that's on us. We should have dissected it more. That being said, for us, for Quick Quack and our marketing strategy, it's extraordinarily important for our Utah customers who are used to our consistent look and feel, that it remains our consistent look and feel. The reason for that is Quick Quack is a car wash company. We have 6 locations here in Utah. We'll have 10 open and operating within spring of next year. Centerville will probably be our 10th location, and we'll have 40 within the next 4 years all across Utah. And the beauty of it is each of our customers who are a monthly member can use any location, nationwide and any location in Utah. So our customers it's our strategy, will come to rely on our consistent look and our consistent feel and our consistent professional appearance, aesthetics, our consistent professional cleanliness, and our employees and staff. And one of the things that Quick Quack does really well, which is why I even started working with them. I was a customer in Spanish Fork before. I live in Mapleton, and Spanish Fork opened about a year ago, and I signed up. And one of the things I started noticing is Quick Quack, their marketing is second to none. They're everywhere. There's a parade float. They have a mascot named Quackles, which goes to the marathons you'll put on, goes to your Easter egg hunts, attends the parades. There's a point to this. And they provide charity prior to any opening. In fact, they'll find someone here in Centerville, like they did in Highland and like they did in Pleasant Grove. In Pleasant Grove, they found Braylee Bug, a young girl who fell off a lawnmower. Her grandma was holding her. She fell off a lawnmower and was cut badly, severely through the torso. And we were able to find her, and then we marketed in that city our grand opening, and the day before, anyone could come and get a free wash and donate to Braylee Bug, and Quick Quack would match those donations. And so we were able to present to her family a check for over $6,000. And in the Highland opening, we presented a check for $10,400 to a girl who has a rare form of cancer, senior at Lone Peak High School. And because we're so involved in the community, it's our plan to create a loyal following. And that loyal following, again, relies on our colors, relies on our consistency, and in order to find us. That said, we also provide 10 days of free premium car washes. We're up to 70,000 free cars washed in Utah, and we're just going. So at the end of the day, we want to wash your car, whatever you decide with what I'm saying. We want to wash your car when this is over. It'll be a great, clean car. You guys will love it, and you'll see Quaggles, our logo. In addition, what has occurred to our site? When we first went to the staff meeting, okay, we're on 400 Watt. We have this site. We're on 400 West. It was the consensus, not everyone, but most people in the staff thought, oh, there's no way you'll be in the Parish Lane guidelines. You have insignificant presence. It's not going to happen. It wouldn't even be fair. There's some of the comments I remember. Then we develop our site plan accordingly. As you know, something like this, how close our building is to the frontage is extraordinarily important to our presence and our marketing strategy. We are losing money every time we push that building back a foot. And it's as close as we can possibly get it. In fact, as is right now, we're 85 feet back from where the curb originally started. The west side of that building is 85 feet east of the curb, of the current curb. And it's consistently gone back more and more as we were brought into the Parish Lane guidelines, much to my chagrin, but we're still friends, and that's fine. It was a great discussion. And so now, at this point, we're looking at this site and thinking, okay, we're trying to be great commercial citizens. We're trying to accommodate the taking now. We have worked with the city and providing the southwest entrance and working with Dairy Queen, and also working with Dairy Queen, knowing that Dairy Queen is not going to provide any financial support to these improvements to their lot, and we wanting to do that to make it good for the city. And another 3 feet is going to be that much more damaging for us. That said, if you could pull up the Parish Lane Gateway standard, I want to go back to the lighting, and I want to go back to the rock and stone. So this is the design standards and guidelines. I don't know if you guys can get a better view. There you go. In your design, the Parish Lane Gateway Code, it states that design standards and guidelines. Design standards are required. When they're required, it's indicated by the verb shall. You guys remember this? When it's a design guideline, the word should rather than shall will be used, signifying that the guidelines are desirable objectives to be achieved, but are not mandatory requirements. And then going down to 12.63.04C1, storyboard material should, not shall, should harmonize with existing surrounding development. And that's key. So I have several pictures. Cassie has kindly prepared them.
These?
Let's do the surrounding businesses. So there's Chili's. We have red and green. They're, especially on their, what is that called that's coming off the window? Awnings. Those are definitely red and green, standard red and green. But my wife has accused me of being colorblind, by the way. So that's a caveat on what I'm saying. In and out, I have yellow and red. Those to me look like primary colors. Those are definitely a normal yellow and a normal red. You can keep going, Cassie. McDonald's, yellow, strong yellow.
Which are not in the Parish Lane Design Guidelines, I should just mention.
That really helps me. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. So is Sonic?
Yes.
Oh, great. So there's a strong yellow. We're back to helping me. And there's a red too. And then Maverick is a red and a green. And then our sites are going to be a yellow and a green, which to me are harmonious and consistent with surrounding businesses.
I just added this to your collage as well of all the stone on Parish Lane, just for fun.
Oh. I don't appreciate it.
Okay.
But I
slip that in there.
I understand your point. But my rebuttal would be just looking at your code. So I understand that you may have precedents that you've interpreted this code in a certain way, but that doesn't necessarily make the interpretation correct. So the code gives you the discretion, especially when we're on 400 West, and I would again like to bring up, we are having less and less visual presence on Parish Lane. In fact, for a fact, anyone headed from the east to the west will not see our site because Dairy Queen, Beans and Brew, AT&T, and Subway will completely block it. And now we are 85 feet in from the curb, which means there's only going to be a certain angle coming from the west that people will be able to see our site. And if the colors are muted, if we're not using our consistent brick, our consistent cement, we're going to be in trouble. And that's going to be something we're going to have to look at. So that's to the lighting, and that's to the color, and that's to the stone and rock. We ask as kindly, respectfully, but with as much crucial importance as possible that you do not require us to mute our yellow or change our building materials that have been presented to you. Just those two items. In every other way, on the Parish Lane guidelines, we've complied, other than the streetscape, which I'd like to talk about next. So motion 1, unless you have a question? No? On motion 1, the staff is recommending 15 feet, and I would ask that we keep it 12 per our current site plan. We have a 6-foot wide sidewalk, and we have 6 feet of streetscape. Dairy Queen and the AT&T and Beans and Brew building were granted a streetscape modification. I asked that we get the modification, but at 12 feet instead of 15. The city's request of additional 3 feet added to our streetscape is too great. We got to draw a line in the sand somewhere. And if 15 feet is required, we may not accommodate the taking. We may just go back to the original curb. We would still work with Dairy Queen on the southwest for sure, but we could comply with the Parish Lane Gateway standards as the site currently is without the taking, and still accommodate the Dairy Queen access. That way, our building would move back to the west, and that's something that we have to consider depending on the decisions you make, but no matter what, we would comply with the Parish Lane Gateway standards, and it would be in compliance with your current laws. And then if we don't incorporate the taking now, later on, there wouldn't be landscaping on the frontage. It would be a curb, and we don't want that either. And we want the landscaping to be there. It's going to be better for everybody, better for the look, better for the street, better for the appeal. As for the streetscape standards, under 12.63.080 in your Parish Lane code, the city may adjust landscaping standards as necessary to meet the intent of this chapter. And again, with the modification, we can incorporate the taking now while providing a beautiful frontage that meets the intent of the PLG standards. It will have trees, the sidewalk, the pedestrian walkways, stamped concrete, the decorative street lights. But without the modification, we temporarily meet the intent, but will eliminate the intent once the taking occurs in a few years. So we respectfully request acceptance of our site plan streetscape as is, and this is our attempt to satisfy the city at great cost to us because we are once again further back to the east than we had, by a lot, than we had ever anticipated. So we don't want to be 3 feet further back. It will cost us even more in lack of visibility, which will devalue the site for us. So every foot matters to us, and at the end of the day, no matter what you decide, we want to build a beautiful car wash there and wash your cars. Any questions for me?
Questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chair, I just have one point at least I'd like to make in response. I don't know if it was addressed earlier because I'd stepped out to help an applicant know when they're on the next agenda. This taking is not a gracious move completely. I mean, it's a great teamwork, you know, with Quick Quack, but it would be a purchase from the city, you know, the tune of $80,000 for these improvements. So this isn't just accommodating the city just for the taking and what's left over. I mean, it's a cost to them to lose the opportunity to be reimbursed for that property, as well as install the landscaping improvements that are associated with it. So I just wanted to be clear that they're not giving up the future expansion road without a cost to the city. The city will be purchasing that property at its agreed value at some point in time.
So the city would purchase the property in the future, though, if they took it in the future, right? Just compensation?
It would probably bought at that time by UDOT.
Okay.
So, you know, this
Is your question right now, it's an RDA decision whether or not to actually purchase that right now, but that's the proposal from staff is
Yes.
to.
So my view of this is really truly a negotiation. They certainly could say, you know what, we'll just go back, do the shared access from the Dairy Queen for the traffic study and allow the taking to get later, and what you get is a curb at the end. They certainly could say that. But at the same time, they also lose an opportunity where the city may participate in some improvement costs and some shares up front, that they're not losing infrastructure that they installed at their cost, because it's being built now once at a time and everybody's cost. So, you know, I just want to point out that it is truly a balance, and from my perspective, it's a negotiation. I know that the 3 feet might be important or not important, but, you know, I'd hate to see them go through an expenditure for improvements at their cost, so when the taking goes, they lose all of that cost and it's not replaced. Because you won't see any landscaping return, you won't see the street lights return, you won't see that they're installing improvements that go away permanently. So they lose an opportunity for the city to purchase the property, and they waste some money on the improvement costs. And so the point is I do think this is a negotiation with them, and that I don't think the idea of walking from it to the parish lane is in their best interest either.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
Comment on that.
Please.
First and foremost, thank you. That was a great comment. However, we actually don't know how much the city is going to compensate us, and we don't know when. It sounds like it could be a long time. We also have not received any affirmation that any of us on our end can rely on as far as being reimbursed for improvement costs that are made to our neighbors and are made specifically because of the taking, to the tune of just over $15,000. So I appreciate that, and that's important, but for us, it's a giant unknown.
Okay, fair enough. I do have a question. Looking at your standard design, if you will, and while I understand that from a marketing standpoint you want them to look similar, it seems to me that changing a rather mundane brick look to a rock look, or you know, some other more decorative exterior, as we've imposed upon others along Parish Lane, is not going to hurt you, it's going to help you. We're pretty proud to have the prettiest Walmart in Davis County, by the way.
Cool.
And we worked very hard to develop guidelines that required that, and likewise others along Parish Lane have complied, even though the word should is there rather than shall, because they felt that it didn't detract from their business, and in fact enhanced it. They weren't very happy about the extra cost, but it wasn't a marketing problem for them. It was more a cost problem. You're making the presentation that your marketing is going to go south because you're changing brick to rock, and I guess I'm just not persuaded.
Yeah, I completely understand that, and I appreciate that counter. For us, it's a little bit of the cost argument, but that's not the key. We would have a difficult time incorporating the rock or stone with our yellow and green. We don't necessarily, designers don't necessarily see how that would work together. Our normal colors with the rock and stone. So it would be a challenge that we don't have an answer for yet. We've looked at it.
I have an idea.
Have you Googled Quick Quack Highland? Because I'm looking at this picture of a Quick Quack car wash that's beautiful, that has the brown brick and that would match like very lovely against the Paris Lane guidelines.
I sent that to Cassie.
You knew that the Quick Quack
Cassie told me the Highland location was going to come up. So
Cassie, would you show the pictures that I sent you?
Highland did get the biggest sum of donation money too. Maybe it was from the Rock.
Bigger than Pleasant Grove.
Yeah.
It could be the area.
So I just did a cursory look of Quick Quack on the web, and I mean, this is
that's the one I'm
pretty obvious that many locations have more than just the bright yellow and the green, and they do incorporate brick and rock or other things. So to me, I felt like because in so many other areas, you see that, you see even like a greenish at the very top one, go to the, that one is more of a muted color. It still incorporates your green. None of that, from what I'm looking at, really takes away from the presence of Quick Quack. You've still got your logo, you still have your name, and there are different designs according to the different areas. Obviously, those two look like they're in more southern
and depending on whether or not
climates.
it's a remodel. And
So
go ahead.
For that, it shows that Quick Quack can accommodate the design standards in which they're located.
So that's correct. Absolutely, Becky. If you say, if the government exercises its authority to interpret this code in a manner that says, build that like Highland, I would think that that's potentially not an appropriate exercise of your authority to say, I've seen McDonald's built like this in Stockton. Centerville government's going to make sure that you build that the way that it was in Stockton.
But let
that
me
being
just
said, to finish, yes, if you decide you need to build your car wash like you did in Highland, and that's what we want, can we do that? Absolutely. We can do that, but it's not what we want to do.
Right.
I've been kicked once before. I don't want to be kicked again. The argument doesn't hold weight with me.
Well, and let me just say, we're not trying to exercise any undue burden for you. We really think, like Chair Hershey explained, this would help you. This would help your business. This would help the surrounding areas. This is a congruent look, and that's why those standards are in place, so that we can help the entire look and feel of Centerville, so that when someone comes to the Quick Quack Centerville, they know how nice it looks and how nice it feels. That's why we have those guidelines, not to exercise any undue burden on you or anyone else, but to create an atmosphere that is appropriate with what the community standards we have.
Totally understand.
Other questions for the applicant? Comments?
I just wanted to bring up a comment, and Joseph, in a lot of your arguments, you're noticing all the shoulds that are in the architectural standards for the design guidelines. And I think that's a really good point, and those should and can be debated. But I'm also seeing a lot of shalls in the landscaping and the streetscape standards. Almost all of them are shalls, and we are being flexible with that, trying to be flexible with that for you and this site because of the changes in your site. And so I think, like you said, Quick Quack has to draw a line in the sand. I think in terms of these guidelines, it's been pretty clear that you're in the guidelines. The commission wants you in the Paris Lane design guidelines. So we also have to incorporate you in some of them. You know, you can get the streetscape or you can get the colors, but you can't try to get out of all of them. So I'm seeing shalls and I'm seeing shoulds, and we can go back and forth, but you can't debate the shoulds and then ignore the shalls too.
I totally agree. In fact, I'm not trying to. In the streetscape, it says the city may adjust landscaping standards as necessary to meet the intent of this chapter.
Which is what she recommended. 15 feet would be adjusted still.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly. So it's my understanding that we are complying, and I'm asking for modification on the 3. I'm not trying to be overly difficult, to be completely honest. And at the end of the day, whatever you guys decide, we want to build a beautiful Quick Quack here, and we want to wash all of your cars. but I owe it to the company I work for to do my very best to maintain what I believe to be a very important standards for our well-being and on our property.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. This matter's been scheduled for a public hearing. Invite anyone who would like to speak on this to come forward at this time. Seeing no one coming forward, we'll close the public hearing. Back to the commissioners. Further questions for staff or the applicant?
I have a couple questions. Staff, if you can tell me the frontage, do you happen to know the frontage from the current curb to the front of KinderCare?
I got it. It's 140 feet.
So currently, where it stands is 140 feet. So we were gonna take the building up
To 85.
roughly 60, so 60 feet closer to the current curb from what KinderCare is.
Yeah.
If I'm doing my
If it's 85 feet from the curb.
quick math.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's bringing the current building that we are recognizing right now and seeing much closer to the street than what is currently there. Not necessarily from what they initially showed us on their site plan, but with what we can see on the site right now.
And you are referencing your numbers off the current curb location,
Yes.
not the new one.
Current curb, yes. The second question I have is, Cassie, giving the additional 3 feet in the landscaping to pushing it, the building back the 3 feet, would that, in your opinion, allow for better space for street trees? Because I know, and maybe we can even have our Public Works Director speak to this, I know that there has been some concern throughout the city on whether we have wide enough park strips to accommodate trees, and if there are trees that are required in the guidelines, and we're putting them in park strips that are too small for what we would want to have happen, then what we're really doing is not making it possible for those trees to grow and continue to be healthy, or causing problems to the owner later down the road with uneven sidewalks and things like that. So is that part of the reason, or?
Yeah, so that's definitely part of the recommendation. The recommended size of a park strip is 8 feet. You know, if you want to go to 10, that's great, but at least 8 feet, and that's for accommodating the trees and the streetlights, and so it doesn't mess up the sidewalks later down the road. And so at 6 feet, we think that that was kind of a tight fit to fit as many trees as they needed to. Because on their plan, they still didn't have enough trees, and they need 6 along that frontage, just for the health and the, maintenance of those trees. So I think if you wanted to modify my modification, maybe you recommend 14 instead of 15, so that's a 6-foot sidewalk plus an 8-foot park strip. So it's not, it's not our standard collector 15 feet landscaping, but it does fit in both things that we want.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, thank you for that.
Other questions or comments for staff? Okay. Probably the best thing to do would be to get a motion on the table. We can further debate it. So Chair will entertain a motion. We have 2 on the table. First, dealing with landscape.
Actually, can I ask staff a question with regard to the landscaping? In the proposed actions, we have a motion 1, but we don't have any reasons for action on motion 1. Can staff articulate the reasons for?
Sure, because we can allow a modification within 1263-080 to adjust the landscaping standards as necessary to meet the intent of this chapter.
All right, then I would make a motion for the Planning Commission to approve an alteration of the landscaping requirements within the Parish Lane design guidelines for the Quick Quack Car Wash at 518 North, 400 West, with conditions 1 through 2 in the staff report for the reason that Cassie has just articulated.
I second.
Been moved and seconded. Open it up for debate.
So I think that, you know, I've struggled a little bit with this 15-foot deal, and I don't feel quite as strongly about the 15 feet as maybe some of the other stuff. I understand the desire to have nice wide park strips and wide sidewalks and all that other good stuff. But I don't know. I'm kind of inclined to figure out, does it really need to be 15 feet, or could we shorten it up somehow? Maybe not, maybe it doesn't work at 12, maybe 13 or 14 or something like that, but somewhere that we can kind of, you know, give a little there and then take a little on the color and rock.
I'm actually with you. I feel much more strongly about the design guidelines from an aesthetic perspective, and I was wondering the same thing. Could we give a little on the 15 feet?
I agree with you in a regard that we would need to give a little, but I do want to remind Cassie, can you just remind us what is it 22 feet? Of 20 feet for landscape? So what Cassie has recommended to us is giving on.
Just for clarity, there's two parameters.
Okay.
The first landscaping parameter, when Cassie's talking about the 15 feet, is measured from the curb to the distance that you have to have landscaping, and that landscaping allows the public sidewalk to be counted in it. So that's one standard that she's quoting, is just arterial street expectations.
Okay.
The Parish Lane Design Guidelines alter that because you still have your 15 feet, but now you reach the property line and you have 20 feet. Past that for your
Right.
berming and your trees and the street lights and everything that the Parish Lane Design Guidelines desire. And that's being brought down from the 20 feet to the 6 feet on their current plan.
So the total would be 35, and
Yeah.
your total you're recommending is 15.
Is 15.
So I agree that it's not as big of a deal as the different look and feel of it, but I also think that Cassie has made a great recommendation from what the Parish Lane Guidelines are to somewhere in the middle that allows good landscaping, healthy trees, things to occur that are still in compliance or close to in compliance with the Parish Lane Design Guidelines. So I am for her recommendation.
I guess I'd be inclined to be a little less stringent. I'm not sure if changing it from 15 to 13 or 14 makes a whole lot of difference. I do think we need to look at more the long-term or longevity, if you will, of the sidewalk and the trees. If they can be healthily maintained within a 12-foot or 13-foot or 14-foot, I think that's more important, because this does not front on Parish Lane, so I'm not as concerned about the uniformity that we are on some of those that do front on Parish Lane.
Chair, I'd like to make an amendment to the motion. I move to have condition 1 read, the public street landscaping area shall be at least 14 feet. And then the rest, per Cassie's recommendation and understanding that a street tree would require 8 feet for health, and then the 6 feet for the sidewalk and curb and gutter.
Amendments on the table?
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded. Any debate on that?
Are you relying on 8 feet for healthy trees based on
The
something?
requirement of if we have a landscaping requirement to put trees in the frontage of there, it would seem asinine to require trees to be put in a small area where it would cause problems for public works. The trees would not survive. I just think to me, if we're going to follow the design guidelines, we should go to the minimum that will allow for the landscaping to be viable.
Oh, I agree. I was just wondering if there was something that you were relying on to say that 8 feet is the minimum viable. Sorry, she just said it. Okay.
She just said it.
Never
so
mind.
That's all.
Corey,
I was looking at
That's
something
what I'm
else
going.
apparently when you were talking. Sorry, Cassie.
Corey, can you remind me, didn't we, when we were talking about what's it called over there across the freeway, Parish Creek that we keep seeing? Is that the one? With the pedestrian walkway and
Yeah.
1250 West? Didn't we spend a lot of time talking about minimum widths for trees, and 6 feet seems to be something that I remember. Was it 6 feet?
That was Cassie's project.
Their park strips were actually more than adequate, so I think we did talk a little bit about it, but they had plenty of room. And they were putting a lot of trees in, and
But I seem to remember on their street that comes down the middle, essentially
Yeah.
the cul-de-sac, we talked about the width there for trees, and there's a lot of discussion about what's the width and how far away it needs to be
we
from the
ended up
curb.
center lining them instead of.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there
As
was
a
center lining, but their park strip, I think, was like 10 feet or something.
Oh, okay.
So
There was a recommendation by the Public Works Director to have the trees to be a specific distance from the curb. And the only reason why we changed that is so that in case that doesn't line up within the center of the park strip, we just removed that and said per the guidelines of the ordinance.
That's right. I remember that now. The center lining was the important part of it, instead of off-centered trees.
Right.
Okay.
It still would follow his recommendation, but just wouldn't require a specific foot distance in case they needed a different.
Out of curiosity, is the 8-foot requirement based on a certain type of tree, or is there a certain type of tree that would work there that would allow for a more narrow strip?
The somewhat complicated is that there are many types of trees, and whether you're doing a columnar tree versus a deciduous tree. It is possible with a coniferous tree or a year-round tree that is a columnar shape to have a smaller distance. When we get into the deciduous trees, which is the species and types that we list by our ordinance, their crown is much wider. And so your drip line is wider, and so the roots go out wider to the crown. And 8 feet is pretty standard across the industry for a small park strip. But truth be told, some cities go down as much as 4 feet. And that's what our standard has been in the past for park strips, is 4 feet. And we've had significant problems with the 4 feet of landscaping. And so, the standard and expectation is try to get to the larger park strips, and 8 feet is still not covered, because you look at a decorative tree, you have a potential crown width of even up to 25 feet. So those roots, even though they're smaller out that distance, they're trying to grow out that distance, and it's that close trunk root that starts pushing up the infrastructure.
The reason I ask is because it sounds like the applicant would probably be willing to put in whatever tree type that would work there that would be the smallest footprint, if it would mean
Certainly, they would get with a landscape architect, and it is not uncommon for them to pick something that is a 4-foot park strip and put a tree in there. But regardless of that recommendation, it's my experience, the Public Works experience is that 4 foot is not sufficient. 6 foot is really kind of the beginning to even talk about, and 8 foot is the desirable.
Any other comments or debate on the amendment?
My last comment would be just that I don't want the fact that we have, a need for motion 2, a need for us to follow those guidelines, to just then let us sort of say, oh, this isn't as important, so we don't necessarily need to follow it, because really, again, I just would like to reiterate that the standard is 35 feet. And we're taking it down with an amendment to 14 feet. And that's still, again, I understand that it's not directly on Parish Lane, but I think that's a good use of the reasons, the reasons for action is being able to utilize some flexibility in there. And I think that really would help us keep that landscaping and not have it be a problem to Public Works and further maintenance.
Yeah, I would just add to that, even though there's compensation being paid for pushing that back further than they originally anticipated, they are getting scrunched into that space a little bit, and I think there's justification for some accommodation there. Any further comment?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, when I say that it's less important, it doesn't mean that I don't think we should follow it, right? It just means that this is an area maybe we're more willing to give than other, right?
Right.
So, anyway, just to clarify that.
Motion to amend is on the table. Motion to amend is to reduce the 15-foot to 14 feet in condition number 1. We'll go ahead and take a vote. Commissioner Hayman?
Aye.
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 Amendment passes. Now to the motion in chief. Further discussion or debate on the motion? If not, we'll take that to a vote as well. Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
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 Motion is approved as amended. Moving then to motion number 2. Chair will entertain a motion.
I hereby make a motion for the Planning Commission to approve the final site plan of Quick Quack Car Wash at 518 North, 400 West with the directives 1 through 5 in the staff report and reasons for action 1 through 3.
I second.
Been moved and seconded. Further discussion or debate?
Yeah, just real quickly, just to kind of, well, I know we talked a lot about this 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, but especially ever since then, every time I drive home from work every day, and I drive through there and I look at that, it definitely will have a significant visual presence from Parish Lane. Sure, maybe not going westbound, that's true, but for pretty much for every car going westbound, there's another car going eastbound, and it's, you know, the KinderCare building that's there right now is low and significantly set back from the road, and you can see it. It's even the KinderCare building, you could almost argue, has a significant visual presence, and so I just think that that's part of the reason why, you know, that's important to me, and I feel like these are things that can be accommodated, so requirements that can be accommodated.
I'd like to make a comment. As you may recall, I was sort of the lone wolf, basically saying I don't think it has the visual impact that everyone else on the commission did. But I lost that battle. Thinking about it further, I mean, if we're going to go down this road, if we've made that decision, which we have, I think it's important that we make this the nicest looking, most inviting, Quick Quack Car Wash in Davis County, and I'm inclined to include in that as many of the guidelines as we can, including muted colors and stone and rock.
And can I echo that with regards to point 4 in the staff report, the colors and materiality of architecture are to be harmonious with the surrounding elevation, including muted colors and earth tones and incorporation of the rock and stone. In my mind, that instruction is saying we want your building to look like the ones that we're seeing in Highland. I think that Highland building, whatever colors it was that they used and whatever brick and stucco color that they used would fit in very, very nicely in the Parish Lane design guidelines. So in my mind, that is what that instruction would encompass.
And can I follow up with that? I think it's really important that we recognize as citizen planners, we don't want to place any undue restrictions or requirements on property owners. We want to allow people to utilize their land, but we also have standards in our community that we follow, and it is our job as commissioners to think through what those standards are and to follow the directives that are in our ordinance. And so I think motion 2 clearly illustrates what our ordinances are and how we've interpreted them, and will eventually actually add great benefit to this project and the surrounding areas.
Yeah, I don't think any burden imposed by city code is intended to be a burden. It's always to get another, meaning that's the consequence of what you're trying to get, except for perhaps Highland, who wants to burden, I'm just kidding. But meaning I don't think that's ever the intent, but I think that's something that we need to be aware of. I personally am not opposed to the bright yellow. As I think of the word harmonious in the code, the thing that should dictate what we look to, I don't think that we have to interpret that as muted colors. I know it has been in the past. I don't think we have to interpret that here. And call me crazy, but I actually think the yellow looks better than the muted stuff. I can see how it definitely stands out from some of the other stuff on Parish Lane, but sometimes in a harmony you need a nice strong tenor. So I am inclined to not require the use of primary colors. However, I don't think I can wiggle out of the rock one.
To clarify, Corey or Cassie, my understanding is that this applies to the building and that the applicant would have some latitude with regard to awnings and signage and...
Yeah, anything that counts in their sign package doesn't qualify under this parameter.
Which explains the bright colors on the Sonic building and the Chili's building and the Dairy Queen.
And Joseph did provide you 4 options of his preferred colors. I don't know if you wanted to look over those and discuss those as your choice as a part of this motion.
So these are Sherwin-Williams colors. These are the applicant's choices?
Yes.
Okay. Which ones of these would meet the Parish Lane guidelines? I'm assuming that Daffodil would probably meet that, but would any of the other two? And I think Cheerful, as they said in the report, that's what they normally use.
Yeah, Cheerful is their preferred choice and their normal choice.
Do Daisy and Lemon Twist qualify?
That's
Sounds
not
like
up for me to decide. All right, here's all.
Yeah, how does
Yeah,
that fit? Because we're not going to decide we're not deciding colors tonight. We're not color
Well, I think that's
deciders.
what Cassie and I were
Yeah.
just quickly talking about is, you know, are you okay with other than the cheerful yellow? I mean, I know there's disagreement, so I'm not trying to say you're heading in a final decision, but if the majority is going to head down the direction, I've heard 2 components. The component of Highland, and what I would hope is that we're not trying to mimic the building elevation schematics perfectly. It's not a match. It's in a fashion similar to the Highland. That's one way you could call that out. Add that little extra to say in a similar fashion to Highland, or you could just simply earth tone colors, including the submittal that has been provided absent the cheerful yellow. Which direction do you want to pursue? If all of you end up there. Got to be careful.
I just know that they're
Logan's
anxious to
making an
get
argument.
going with their building permit and go further in this process, and I don't want to have to come back to you later unless it's possible to just put it in our hands as to pick the color during the building permit process.
Well, it's a couple of things. I think you should identify the edges of the road for us so that there's less dispute about it. And then if there is any dispute somehow arises, we would return it to you, but hopefully we could work through. So if you say earth tone in a fashion used in Highland, then that's the color tone palette that we're expecting them to come up with, and we'll be verifying that. If you say that and this range of palette, then those are the places that we'll be looking to during the building permit.
I know personally, I have a hard time making a decision on a wall color based on a tiny little paint chip. So I don't feel comfortable with the variation in screen colors. Personally, I don't feel comfortable okaying any of the colors that they've provided. I do feel comfortable with what you said about
In a fashion and manner of the Highlands.
similar. That's just my view of it. I don't know that I could choose a whole side of a building based on what I see on my screen.
That was going to be my comment as well. I don't know how this, I mean, of the 4, the only one that I would even remotely consider would be the Daffodil, but I would really like to see how that stacked up against the color that they put on the Highland building, because I can see it all together in the Highland building. I can't really see it with this one little paint chip, but I would be comfortable if they would build the building in a fashion that's similar to the Highland building.
Build the building or
Or do the
scheme.
I'm
Colors
sorry
and materials.
to clarify, because I think Corey's point is a good one. I'm not looking for a particular design in terms of the building architecture. I just want sort of that look and feel, and if there are different architectural elements in it that sort of get it in that ballpark, that would be fine for me.
Me too.
I'd be okay with any of these four. This feels like a lot of conversations I have with my wife. You know, she's always throwing things at me, and I'm like, I don't know. Those look like the same color to me, but whatever.
No.
All I know is that these are not so bright that I need to break out my eclipse glasses, you know, so whatever.
I think I kind of tend to agree a little bit with Logan on this, and I'm typically not a bright color person. However, I just, for some reason, even their green and brighter yellow don't seem to me to be like neon or anything. So I guess I'm of the opinion that if it's a big deal to them to maintain that, maybe we could have some latitude there. Maybe not the cheerful, but if they want to do something a little brighter than daffodil.
So besides the two of us, does anyone else like the Highland building?
Yeah, do it. Yes, I support that.
Okay.
I'm fine with it, but I'm also fine with.
Well, and I think what that does is actually, if we choose a color right here, that probably gives them less latitude to make it look and feel more like the Highland building. And if we sort of keep it general and say this is that look and feel that we appreciate, then they can go back and say, okay, in this area we can use this color. But specifically choosing the colors right now would really kind of maybe inhibit them from doing that.
I can support that.
I'm wondering a little bit too if the applicant mentioned the rock or stone exterior. To me that is a big deal that be on there, but I can see that there may be issues with, you know, getting a color combination.
Right.
I mean, I don't want to lock them down too much that they
Right.
can't make their building look nice.
But they achieved that in a sense in Highland as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So
we
how
have
do
a
we
motion on the
include
table.
that?
Does someone want to put an amendment forth?
I move to amend Directive 4A to include the language that Corey said, that says to harmonious with the
Fashion and manner applied to the Highland building.
Do you want to do that in 4A, or do you want to do that like for 4? Because you want it to apply to B.
Okay, yeah, 4, just 4 in general.
Yeah.
Maybe just add a 4D.
Sure.
And then say as follows, the elevation will be harmonious with the look and feel of Highland, Utah location, or something similar.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and to amend by adding a condition D, incorporating the Highland. I guess we're talking about both the stone and rock and muted tones, right?
Right, and I just want to weigh in on that again, because I don't think our guidelines go so far to say they have to build the Highland building.
No,
Yeah.
that's right.
The only thing in the staff report that they're missing, arguably under the should, is the color and the rock.
Right.
And the rock, the ordinance actually includes cement brick, or brick,
Okay.
or rock. So I'm a little concerned that you are going beyond the boundaries to say, we want that Highland building. Now, maybe that wasn't your intent, but I think you need to say, rather than fashion and manner, regarding color scheme and materials, or something more like that, because in my opinion,
stay away from the building and just talk about the use of those materials.
You know, they have a right to build a building with harmonious colors in the way that they want, as long as it meets the ordinance. And I think the staff report says that the design of the building meets the ordinance. It does step, it does have human character.
Right.
The only thing we're really talking about, in my opinion, is the color and whether you want some additional. It's not, I don't even think the ordinance says it has to be brick. It just says it has to be primarily cement block, brick or stone, And then when they say primarily on certain facades, you're only talking a certain percentage.
It would be my preference not to have a D, but I was under the impression that the staff wanted some directive on what
Yeah,
to tell them.
I'm
So
just
I would prefer not to put anything in there about Highland, but
Well, the issue that, I mean, you know, fashion and manner, I'm just talking about the use of exterior materials. I'm not talking about the design of the building. You know, what I'm trying to set it up is, you know, they have been the most pleasant, arguable, agreeable people on the planet this whole process. So, I'm trying to make it easier on both of us that we don't slip, because this has become a focal point and a concern. And I wanted to make sure that we don't just put a rock on one column or just a wainscot and say we met the expectations. You know, so to my mind, I'm trying to think of is that if you're using the Highland as example, we're not mimicking that building per se, but we're going to apply the use of rock or brick or something on the columns and the bump ups on the architecture like the Highland, so that we don't have to argue that the wainscot on the back of the building of rock is the only thing that they put on, and now I'm in a battle zone.
So Lisa, what language would you feel comfortable with if we were to add a D to that? Or would you not feel comfortable with any addition?
Well, no, I think that staff needs some direction, because in some of the discussion, in my opinion, some are leaning towards wanting to see the Highland building, but I don't think that really that's, you know, we have a building that we like, it's really color and materials, so it's more of providing harmonious colors and materials, and maybe Shaylin said it best at the beginning, which is, you know, the D is, you know, look to the colors and materials of the Highland building. But again, I you know, do they have to do the whole building like that? Because now are you going to change their whole gray color scheme, or are you just saying that you want to tone down the yellow and you want some rock? Allowing them to use the gray color scheme with a toned down yellow. I mean, there's a
I don't care if they use the gray or the brown, but I just think the feel of what that looks like feels nice. So I think that's kind of the point. If the staff needs directives, it's just that the feeling that the look and feel achieves at the Highland building, for me, feels appropriate. Not that it necessarily has to be that exact color, but that it's that feeling of that muted, nicer look.
And I think it's up to Corey and Cassie how much direction they want, because the conditions do say that we want the primary colors muted and we want them to incorporate rock or stone into the architectural design.
My only hesitancy is if you go down this road, I think you do have a high value expectation, and it's fair that the applicant and the staff don't get in a battle zone about that. And that's why I'm trying to say, if you're using Highland, we're not mimicking it, but if you want to say, I'm trying to get to the point of how those materials are applied to the building, because they could do a dark rock and still achieve that feel, rather than an earth tone.
I am convinced, based on the presentation by the applicant, the statement that you made that they're the most agreeable, disagreeable people that you've dealt with for a while, that staff is more than capable of working with them to come up with something that incorporates what's already in this motion in a way that will achieve the goals of the guidelines. And item C, I think, solves the problem. If there's disputes and they cannot be resolved at staff level, then they'll come back to us.
Okay.
And so I think I would vote against the amendment by adding anything and allow the process to proceed based on the amendment as it's written, or based on the motion as it's written.
I agree. I'll vote against my amendment.
Then I just have a quick question, because I'm hearing some conflicting opinions here. Is cheerful yellow acceptable?
No.
No.
Is that That's, because I know it's going to be a main question that
it's
Joseph
not-
asked,
it's
and I'm
not-
hearing a lot of
That
answers
is not
from
a
you.
mooted tone.
No, it is not
I'm hearing
acceptable.
from Logan and Kevin that it would be
They
fine.
can vote against the, they can vote against the motion if they don't like it.
Why don't you just make a motion on cheerful yellow?
Okay.
No,
We could.
They all look like,
Then are the rest of them fine? Because
I
some of you are saying that the bright, you have a higher tolerance for a brighter yellow, and I don't want to make the wrong decision
Right.
later.
Yeah, I mean, you're divided, and the one way to decide whether cheerful level
Yeah, can
yellow
I
is
make a motion
acceptable.
while the amendment's on the floor?
Okay, before you do that, though, can I ask a question? Joseph submitted the colors, right? You're fine with all four of the, is that okay if I ask him a question?
Sure.
Are you fine with all four of those colors?
Yeah, where we have preferences, but yeah.
You have preferences to cheerful.
Cheerful is the one we normally use, that's the preference, and then it's in order of preference from left to right.
Okay.
That said, I agree with what has been said as far as rock or stone, and if you choose a color, and now there's rock and stone, we have to make it all work, right?
Yes.
And so, like it says in the motion 4C, work with the staff, and then if we can't agree, it comes back to you.
Do you know if daffodil is in the Highland location?
I don't know what color yellow is.
I told you to find that out, Joseph, and you didn't listen to me.
I feel very wary of
I'm with you.
voting on a
I'm with you.
color tonight. Very wary.
I think they should decide the color.
If you're comfortable letting
have
them
to-
use the ranges, I think they've got the message of how to do the architecture. You're comfortable with the ranges. I think they'll build a building with material and whatever color they choose that kind of matches.
And we're comfortable working with staff as per 4C, and I think we'll come up with something that's beautiful, that adheres to the Parish Lane Gateway Code, if that's what the council decides we need to do, which I'm still hoping. But yes, and then if we can't agree, which I doubt highly, then it would go back to planning commission, but I just don't see it happening.
I know I am only one person, but I do want to go on record as saying that I think that cheerful daisy and lemon twist are not harmonious with the Parish Lane guidelines, and it's difficult for me to know whether daffodil complies or not because we've only got a small square. But I can feel very confident in stating that I do not believe that the other three are harmonious, and I would vehemently object to the use of those colors.
And I would 100% agree with that.
I tried to pick some that were progressively more muted, so anyway.
Thank you.
Although I do want to compliment the Quick Wax attorney. I think that he has done an excellent job in trying to promote the interests of his client, and I do appreciate his arguments, even if I vehemently object to the color of yellow that's been presented in many of these. But I appreciate the arguments.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have an amendment on the table that we need to decide or dispose of. As the case may be, it has been moved and seconded. You ready to take a vote on the amendment?
This is 4D.
This is 4D.
Yes.
Commissioner Logan.
Nay.
Johnson.
no.
No?
No.
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 Okay, so no 4D. So the motion on the table is the motion as written. Any further amendments or discussion on that?
I'm going to try. I hereby make a motion that we amend motion 2 to state in A that can include, what was the fourth of those four colors?
Daffodil?
Daffodil. In addition to striking number 2, because some things that Lisa said made me wonder if we can even preclude them from doing the concrete brick, which might be in the code. That's my motion.
You mean B?
B?
B, thank you. The second one, B, thank you.
Well,
Okay.
just so you know, I mean, my comment, yes, you can require additional, but my comment was you can't require the whole Highland building just because you like that look.
Okay.
We need to focus on what our standards require.
Thank you for the clarification. I'd like to amend my amendment to just add daffodil to A.
Okay, we have an amendment. Have a second? Your amendment dies for lack of second. So back to the original motion. Any further comment or debate? Let's vote. Commissioner Hayman.
Aye.
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 Nay.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay. We've been here for 2.5 hours. Anyone want to take a break, or should we, or just?
That would be great.
What
Okay.
about right after Don Youngblood?
Yeah, let's
Should
let
we
it
take
go.
a break after that?
Okay, because the next one may take us.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move to the Don Youngblood matter. This is a discussion of possible, the consideration of the proposed final site plan for Don Youngblood's final site plan at 650 North, 1250 West. This matter's been scheduled for a public meeting as well. So turn it over to staff.
Okay, thank you. So depending on when you read your packet, this might have drastically changed. I updated some new things this morning and changed the recommendation. So I couldn't change the entire report, but I did update the conditions and the recommendation. Just to give you the backstory, Mr. Youngblood submitted his application for a final site plan about a month ago and then went on vacation. So during the review process and the staff writing, the report writing, while changes and modifications came up, he wasn't available to make them. But then after receiving the report, he very impressively quickly changed them all within a matter of hours. So I have changed my recommendation from table to approve based on his changes to the final site plan that he did in very impeccable timing. So this is a final site plan for an office and warehouse building on 650 North and 1250 West. And the purpose of this building is office and warehouse, obviously, and a lot of outdoor storage in the back for cars and vehicles and just outdoor storage needed for warehousing. So it did meet all of the development standards with some modifications. It will have access to the neighboring parcel and will require a cross-access agreement because these garages do go into this drive aisle, and that will be shared. And yeah, so those were some concerns that were brought up, and the rest have been changed to accommodate the drive aisles, to have two-way drive aisles, and the setbacks have been adjusted, and additional parking has been made to accommodate both office and warehouse for the size of this building. The only recommendation that I can add to the site plan as amended is to pave the drive aisles of the parking lot as well as the parking lot spaces. As it stands now, just this outdoor storage and this area in the back is just listed as gravel, where the parking lot spaces are paved. And it's just recommended that the drive aisles as well on the behind the parking and through the drive aisles would also be paved. So that is our our major adjustment to the amended final site plan, and just a few other odds and ends before building permit can be wrapped up. So,
okay, thank you. Questions for staff? All right, great. Let's turn to the applicant if he's here. He'd like to speak on this.
Like a quick quack, just go ahead and approve it. All right, I'll answer any questions.
Any questions for the applicant? Thank you, Mr. Youngblood.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, this matter has been scheduled as a public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on this matter may come forward at this time. Seeing no one coming forward, I'll close the public hearing. Further discussion or comment by the commissioners?
I just had an additional suggested condition. I know at staff level, we've talked about whether they need public utility easements, but I've seen notes both ways. But so if you could just add a condition that if if the property does not already have public utility easements, that the applicant shall submit those for recording prior to the building permit.
That was part of the, what we just got a few days ago, and I went ahead and got the sewer one, so I
Yeah,
think
I
I
thought I
have,
added a
I think I have
condition.
all of them now.
Okay.
There's a cross-access easement
And I've got
requirement. I'm just talking about the PUEs.
the access, I've got a legal document for that also.
I know there's some easements on it, we just need to either verify or have them.
Right, because I was looking through my file today and saw a plat that did not have them, but I know in DRC, we've seen a plat that did, so I
Yeah.
just want
So
the
I
opportunity
think
to check.
just a verification that they're there, that's
Okay.
really all
Yeah.
we're suggesting, is that it be an added condition. So, Katie, did you get that added condition number, I guess it'd be 7? Okay,
9.
9? Oh,
7.
I think it's
Oh,
7
the
on
new one. Oh, right, sorry.
Okay, anything else? Any further debate? If not, let's go ahead and take a vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Do you need a motion?
Oh, sorry, I thought we had a motion. I'm sorry.
I will make a motion
Go
for
ahead.
the planning commission to approve the final site plan for the Youngblood Office Warehouse to be located at 650 North, 1250 West, with directives 1 through 6 in the staff's updated recommendation as of August 23rd, 2017, with the 7th condition that Lisa has just articulated and suggested reasons for the action 1 in the updated staff report.
Second.
Now it's been moved and seconded. Any further debate or discussion? We'll move to a vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
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 Motion has been approved. Thank you. Okay, let's take,
I move that we don't take a break. I really do. I know we've been here for a long time, but people have been waiting a long time too, and we are an hour behind,
Okay.
and we are going to be here all night.
And we're not
So-
actually voting on anything tonight, right? We're just making suggestions?
that's right. Well,
Yeah, to-
with the caveat that those who need to take a break, as long as they don't reduce us below a quorum, may do so.
There you go.
All right, we'll move on. This is, the next item of business is a discussion of the general plan language for the Pages Lane Commercial District. Staff has provided us with possible draft amendments to the general plan regarding this district, and has noted in the staff report that in order to meet the required public hearing notice, the Pages Lane general plan amendments will be scheduled for hearing on September 13th, 2017 at the regular meeting of the Planning Commission. That being the case, I think the purpose for this discussion really and this meeting is to discuss the staff's recommended language and give staff further direction as to where that language should go so that we have something to formally present, discuss, and debate at our next meeting. That can take the shape of a couple of forms, I guess. One would be we choose among the suggested drafts that staff has provided, or we allow both drafts to move forward to the public hearing. And so I would open it up first for discussion by staff to tell us what you have done and what you would like to see accomplished here, and then we'll turn it to the commission for some discussion, and then open it up to the public if they wish to make comment.
Yeah, as far as the hearing, we went back and checked the notices. There was a notice of intent properly done. There was also a second notice of intent when the Brighton project came in to amend the general plan. And with the Brighton's project, there was a notice of intent to amend this a public hearing for this section. It was generic in its form, but it's easily to be logistically linked to Brighton's version of the general plan amendment, which eventually was recommended denial by the Planning Commission and then also rejected by the City Council because we were in this larger process. Although that notice was generic, it's easily to say it was tied to that and that there wasn't really known by the general public as whole that we were going back to this larger view. And so I felt like we should not host that hearing tonight and schedule that for the September 13th for an actual hearing. And then we would post the traditional notices, and as promised, the same list of owners and business owners and property owners would also be sent that notice so that they would know that this is coming up for the review. Really, I don't want to spend a lot of time because it's really for you to kind of look at it. I've tried to capture, actually going back and trying to create language on the 3 scenarios became an interesting logistical problem. So what I've done to try to simplify it is, instead of having an alternative for commercial just on the corner and then commercial trailing down on the east side on 400 West, I've just combined that into one, that we're going to go towards commercial, and then added the effort to put in a city park in that scenario. Obviously, you could eventually mix and match the scenarios, whatever you land on, but trying to capture, okay, here we're going to do the commercial, convert to some residential, and potentially a city park, and wrote the general plan language in a new format that talks about goals and objectives, what we're trying to do. The purpose of the objective comes to greater clarity of goal 2 for the city park. This is where we know that we can go for redevelopment using commercial and residential, but it adds goal 2 to try to shoot towards the direction of a park. But if that fell off the table for whatever reason and didn't come to fruition, we would still move forward with goal 1. So it gave you the opportunity to chase the park. As I tried to look at, okay, how do I incorporate, if you don't want to go to a park and you want to go towards this small feature public-private partnership, I wrote the alternative goal to come into play. So that way you can choose the commercial component, the residential redevelopment, the park, or the feature. And so there's some mix and matching. The second scenario was strictly residential development, and this was based on go for a park. But it became problematic as, are we trying to convert the entire eastern half to park? And by the way, caveat, the western block area is written in a description of maintaining those uses. And I'm pushing the limits on that western part a little bit because right now I'm recognizing the South Main Street corridor plan that we have in place. I know there's discussion on whether that should continue. But for today, the existing policy is that that area is part of the gateway. So what would happen is the western half would stay in the gateway and the eastern half would be eliminated from the gateway and convert to this new format of redevelopment. And so I tried to point that out on the western block, that you can stay as is, and in the future, and I tried to put some time frames to it. They're not carved in stone. Short term, trying to say, the LDS Church Services, the gas station, the great pizza joint there that we go to at least once a month. Keep them as is, or a future conversion to the South Main Street plan. That's yet to be decided because if you recall, the densities and all of that were taken off the table. So we don't know how that will eventually play out. But the eastern half is the focal point of new language in particular. Second scenario is the park, go for the park. But the idea is, okay, we're probably not going to do all of it as a park. So I wrote a residential component with the park in there. And then the third scenario, and tried to color code these, is strictly residential development, redevelopment, eliminating commercial, and narrowing it down to the public-private feature, which I could have put in as an or, but it was just trying to get the 3 scenarios you wanted the best I could. And so that's really what the language is built around, is those scenarios. I think going forward, certainly if there is some consensus, you can strike off some areas and say, let's go to the public for just this scenario. But I think from my perspective, the various scenarios are on the table, and the opportunity to review that language and have the public say, I like this component, but I don't like this component. And then you can be selective, unless there's clearly a scenario you don't think should be talked about, and get feedback on the various scenarios. So then you can come back in and say, okay, from the public hearing staff, we want you to, yes, include commercial, but only to this extent, or all of this thing. No, don't include commercial, just redevelopment and a feature or a park. If you get my hopes and dreams of the outcome. And then we would come back after the public hearing and your direction. This is the way I envision it, unless you're very clear after the public hearing where you want to go. And I'm thinking it's going to be a little bit more feedback on what people like. We'd craft the final version, bring it back to you for final consideration and recommendation to the council at the following second meeting in September, if we moved that fast.
Great. Corey, before we jump into consideration of the three alternatives and perhaps some clarifications, there are just a few technical corrections that I think we need to make. So if these move forward to the next round and are published in any way after this meeting, these corrections are in place. And so I'd like to propose a few. On your first scenario, and this carries through to all three actually, under objective number 1, under goal 1, there's the word R in the second line, provided that R, I think that's to be area, provided that area to be redeveloped. And that carries forward in virtually all of them.
Okay, that's my cutting and pasting.
Yep. On objective 5 on the next page, I think you're referring to 400 east rather than 400 west, is that right?
Yep.
So that correction should be made. Where the Parks and Recreation is mentioned under goal 2, objective 1, we should change that to Parks and Recreation Department, I think, or
Committee.
whatever it's.
Parks and Rec Committee?
Is it committee?
Committee.
Whatever it is.
Yep.
Just for clarity.
Okay.
Then I was wondering, several times we talk about, we use the word ought to. Do we want to be more specific here and say, again, should or shall? General
I think,
plan,
yeah,
know
that
you use more should, but.
Yeah, I think that's how strong you want the language. In a general plan, we're trying to give the guidance, but as soon as you tie down to shalls, less flexibility shows up because we tie our zoning implementation to the general plan.
Right.
And so that's why I started trying to use words of ought but should sounds like the shoulds we've been debating tonight.
Yeah, and I just raised that as a,
Yeah,
as a
and
point.
I think
You
it's.
might want to consider.
Yeah, and I think if you want a shall in there, then, yeah, your ordinance is tied to it. But again, a general plan by philosophical sense is to be general, give you that general guidance and allow the instrument of the zoning ordinance to implement it. But it depends on how strong you want that goal. So I think you should consider the should, the must, the shall, the oughts.
Okay. Just wanted to go over a couple of those technical things, so we got those.
Thanks
out
for
of
the
way.
feedback.
So, let's open this up just for discussion by the commission for a moment. If anyone would like to propose a particular way of going about this discussion, I'd love to hear from commissioners on that, or we can open it up to the public now, but if anyone has.
And also don't forget that it doesn't have to end here. If there's elements that the commission is seeing, you can send those suggestive edits so that we can incorporate those ideas in at least the proposal version of the next meeting.
I don't have any suggestions for how to go about this, but I did want to maybe bring up something that we've discussed several times, and as I've thought about it over the past couple of weeks, not to belabor this or slow it down, but I think we do need to have a little quick discussion about the park and acreages. As I've gone through and looked back at some of the numbers, we've talked about this 3.35 acres per thousand on the south side. I think it's really important to remember that was the south side. It didn't include all of the parks in the north. And as I kind of ran some new numbers, I think perhaps today the thing that has really hit me is we're talking about a sizably significant amount of money, and I know it's not our job to figure that out, for 3 acres. $1.7 million is the value. So as I was looking at that, I was like, I wonder what that increases our park space by. And it's about 2%. If you consider all of the parks and all of the residents. So when we're looking at this, is that the best way, if the city had $1.7 million, is that the best way to spend that money? Or are there better places for us to put that money? Because in my mind, it kicks the can down the road a little bit. I don't know what the city is going to do with the 160 acres on the mountainside, but if you took the money to buy this property for a park, you could do a lot of really cool things on that mountainside. So I mean, I know I'm kind of bringing this up last minute, but I think we need to consider a little bit of that when we're making these suggestions to the city council. I don't regret that we've looked at a park in this area. I think it's important that we looked at it. But what about the west side? Something out by Legacy Trail, you know, something where we can access trails and maybe it's a more natural state of a park. I'm not trying to change, you know, I know that's another discussion for another night, but I wondered if we should have perhaps another scenario wherein maybe it is just residential and we don't, I mean, I look at it and I think a 1 acre park is not very big. And I think a 3 acre park is really expensive. And maybe this, you know, the city's resources are finite. We don't think there's even funding for it currently. And I have no idea what the RAP tax, you know, where that money's going or what's planned, or obviously that's not our job, but I just want to throw that out there that maybe we need to consider some of that too.
You raise a good point. However, I do think that the public-private participation in a park, if nothing else than to create a buffer strip between the residential and the commercial, still makes a lot of sense.
And I'm not necessarily suggesting we get rid of the whole thing. I just think, you know, I love that Shillian brought up last time that, you know, it'd be nice to have a survey. Like, are people really willing to put their money where their mouth is? And I think personally, I'm probably willing to, you know, put some money where my mouth is. But if I were given that scenario of purchasing a 3 acre parcel over by the old Dick's or having the opportunity to develop something maybe a little bigger, I'd have to think about it, which would be the best, you know, how I'd want to spend my money. So but not suggesting that we don't send something like this up, maybe the 1 acre up to the city council. I just wonder if there's a scenario where we have a strip of commercial and residential and have that as an option as well. I'm totally cool if that's not what people want to do. That's what I thought about over the last couple of weeks.
You know, I've thought about this as well, and it's been quite obvious that I've been wanting to talk about a park, but I don't want to talk about a park, and I know Corey's going to hate this.
No, I don't hate
I don't want to
anything.
talk about a park if we can't afford it, and I don't want to talk about a park if it means devaluing the land, and I don't want to talk about a park if residents aren't willing to support that financially. Like, that to me, any of those scenarios kills a park to me. I still want a park, but any of those scenarios kills a park to me. Because I want to respect the valuation of the property and the property rights that exist and the current valuation. I want to respect that we have financial burdens as a city, that we just raised property tax, but I don't think that was that was because we haven't done it for years and years and years. But I recognize that there may be better ways to spend our money. So I want it to be on the record that my support of a park is not in any way, shape, or form, does not mean that we should devalue the land, that we shouldn't pay for what it's worth, that we shouldn't get buy-in completely from residents. And so it does put me in a tough situation, because I would love to talk about a park, but I don't know if we can afford a park. So that doesn't come to any conclusion.
And here's another thing, if I can just add this. So I got this is called the Community Facilities, Section 12-460 of the general plan. If you take the full acreages of open spaces, including schools, which is what we did when we looked at just the south end, it's really not 3.35. If you take out the 160 acres, it's quite a bit higher. It's like 8.6 or 9. Based on the 2010 census, it's 9.3. Does that sound right to you, Corey? I was gonna say, I hate to throw these numbers out.
The lower number is just saying that we're recognizing only city-purchased developed parks.
Yeah.
The parks plan goes broader than that, and it's including passive space of the mountainside. It's including all your school property open space, and then your typical city park space. And so if the city, that's what the community facilities plan is, recognizing all of those open spaces. So if the argument is those mountainside and schools don't count, yeah, the lower number is closer, but I don't think that's what the general plan's trying to say. It's trying to say with the schools, and we do have an anomaly. I think Freedom Hills Park is a heavy influence on the passive space element, even though part of it's developed. 160 acres obviously is undeveloped at this time, but if you count schools and city parks, you're back up to the 8 and 9, depending if you use the 2010 census of 15.3, is it? And I think we're 16.5 on the estimated census.
Yeah, so the 8.65 was based on 16,500 residents. The 9.3 was the 15,335 from the 2010 census. I did take out, like, they've got a proposed 1 acre for Founders Park that we don't currently have, and I don't know what this Parish Creek Parkway was, but I took it out. And I took the mountainside, the 160 acres off to get those numbers.
Thank you for doing that
So
research.
I'll tell you real quickly, I've had some thoughts about some of this stuff. You know, in my opinion, part of the reason why park was such a popular response with our public survey is because it is the exact opposite of what's been thrown around out there, which is density, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's, you know, people maybe they don't necessarily want a park, but they definitely don't want density. And that's what it's in their mind. If you don't want density, what do you want? Oh, park. That's the opposite, right? So I think that's part of the reason why it's as popular as it is. So along those lines, I had a little bit of, you know, a minor epiphany a couple weeks ago afterwards when I was talking to Sheilyn, and, you know, she likes to bring up the fact that, so your lot is 0.2? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which would not qualify for residential low. And so I had a little thought about that as well. The first home that I owned in Woods Cross was on a 0.17 acre lot. But, you know, obviously at the time I didn't really know much about zoning and all that other business. And so I had no idea. But that was, so it's 6 units per acre, but it was all single family detached. And so because it was all single family detached, it felt like any old regular neighborhood, right? And so one of the thoughts that I've had as I've read through this and whatnot is, you know, maybe a way to make this somewhat palatable to people is to say that we would allow residential, but allow residential at something like 6 units per acre, single family detached. So it feels like a neighborhood. It feels like, you know, something not dense. And I know I've talked in this meeting or in other past meetings before about the way things feel, you know, and some certain things feel like density. And I feel like if you were to do something like a single family detached, even if it is 6 units per acre, I think that would be something that wouldn't feel dense, and it might be palatable to people to do, you know. And then it doesn't necessarily have to be a park. I still think a park would be awesome. I think it'd be great. The bigger the better. But if we're going to do residential, my proposal would be 6 units per acre, single family detached.
The difficulty with that right now is based on the way that our code is drafted. Because I have actually floated this idea of breaking up the medium into.
Just so you know, and I know the timing is, and I was bringing it up in the director's report. City Council received the Bell petition for the rezone and reconsideration. They have directed staff to vigorously bring the granulation of the RM zone to the commission and back to the council as tools in their quiver. So September 13th, you will have a proposal to granulate the RM zones along with sending that up to the council. So you will see some interesting provisions, hopefully.
I'm delighted to see that we're revisiting that because I think that there has been a lot of tension there. There is a huge difference between 5 units an acre and 8 units an acre in terms of that feel that Kevin is talking about. I have also been giving this a lot of consideration, and it's interesting, Gina, because I had almost the opposite reaction or the opposite thought process from what you were thinking. As I've thought about it more, I'm thinking, what is the maximum park that we can put there? Because ideally, that's what I would like to see. And here's the way that I look at this piece of property. There are other areas on the outliers of Centerville where we have an opportunity to take a rather large contiguous part of land and put together a park, but we as Centerville are running out of space in the built-out area where we already have. And so this is, I think, one of the last opportunities that we will have as a city to look at a large contiguous piece of property and put a park in where there are already existing residents built out, and in a part of this community where I don't think that we have a lot of park space. I mean, I know we have a little pocket park over in Centerville Commons, but I don't think that a lot of people really recognize that that's there. And I also think that this is a really great opportunity for us to bring in not just a regular old park, but some type of not a landmark park, but something that's a little different, i.e. skate park or dog park or something along those lines. And so the more I have thought about it, the more I've thought if there is a way to do it, and I still would really like to know if the public is willing to back it, because the public comments that we received were there was a lot of support for a park, which makes me somewhat optimistic that people would be able to get on board with it. And so I view this as sort of an ideal opportunity for us to put a park in an area where, I mean, we won't get this chance again. We build it out and we allow it to go up at single family homes, and it will never be a park. Nor will any of the areas that are developed around it with single-family homes or multifamily homes or what have you. So my thoughts for what they're worth.
And I totally agree with you. And I do think, I mean, you still have to remember there's that 3.35 acres per thousand. That is the south side of Centerville. Mm-hmm. So there is obviously, I mean, if you look at this list, I can send this down, but if you look at that list, the big parks are in the north end. So I totally do not disagree with what you're saying at all. I just look at it and go, okay, but there's that 160 acre parcel on the mountainside. Could that be a natural type park? Fire pits, some tables, some restrooms, some parking lots, so it's a little more accessible to people who, you know, hit those trails, but gives, I look at that and go, that could be a really great opportunity too. And the city has that property. It's not going anywhere. There's not necessarily a master plan for that, but we're gonna, if we do this park at 1.7 million just for the property, we are definitely gonna be putting off future development of, you know, maybe a really cool mountainside type natural setting, or something out on the west side that accesses Legacy Trail. I mean, I'm just throwing out there that what would our citizens want if they were given those choices? You know, what would they say that, you know, if they were going to put some money towards helping with the park, what would they say? I guess I'm just saying we're getting really granular with this 8 acres of space, and there's whatever gets decided. If the city council were to say, yes, we're going to buy this property, that's cool, but that just puts off other options for future park development on that mountainside or on the west side. But I agree with you that there's definitely seems to be less open space on the south side, and yeah, this is an opportunity. So I'm not suggesting we don't send a park option on up. I think we have to look at the fact that there are other places to develop parks.
Well, I think part of the appeal of the mountainside is that it is undeveloped.
Yeah.
So.
That is true, and obviously you wouldn't want to develop all 160 acres, and I'm not saying that, I am not speaking for the fact, I don't even know what that property looks like. I haven't been up there, I don't know what the boundaries are. I'm just throwing that out there that, you know.
Well, and I think that to do any development on the mountainside would probably cost you a lot more money too, because the road up First South to get up there is narrow and it's paved part of the way up, but to get any type of development that would make it, I think kind of what you have in mind would be really expensive.
Yeah. I'm not suggesting that that is the option. I just am throwing out there that we're looking at one parcel of property, but there might be some other options otherwise too.
The other thing that struck me, and I'm not opposed to a park. I'm not sure I would go as far as Shaylin has gone and say, you know, maximize what we can do here. My thought is that we've got some competing concerns here. We've got the density concern. We've got commercial that's already in place. That's not going anywhere for a while. As I look at scenario, well, I'll call it the blue scenario, the residential redevelopment alternative scenario, it contemplates that over time there may be some changes in the commercial aspect of this area. It allows for the existing commercial to remain with the idea that residential will eventually move and grow into the space that's shown on the map. That coupled with a buffer park on the west side allows for the developer to develop something that or gives more flexibility to a developer to meet the what we've called the granular residential medium, if you will. It doesn't have to be, if you give enough space and enough opportunity for future growth, it gives enough space for something less than 8 units per acre, which I think is probably more palatable to the citizens. And if as Kevin mentioned, we could move towards some sort of smaller lot, single-family residence there that creates more of a community feel, or you know, part single-family, part multifamily, depending on location, that could work as well. But I'm just thinking that in order to achieve kind of the best of all worlds for both the city and for the property owner, that it may make the most sense to send up something like our blue proposal number 3. Not opposed to sending more than one. That's the one I'd vote for.
Well, see, if I had to pick one of the 3, I like the green one, partly because it does have a larger park in it. But I would, if we were to do the green one, I would like to change objective 2 on there to reflect the comments that I made about 6 units per acre, single family detached. That would be kind of my own opinion. And that, like I said, I think that would make it more palatable to many of the residents of the city. If you just say 8, as it's written right there, 8 units per acre, single family, twin home, townhomes, I think a lot of people would really struggle with that, right? So.
Well, and the reason why I like green also is we originally talked about red because we wanted to include the commercial, but I don't think that with green, it's not that we're saying the commercial leaves right away.
Right.
It's that over time it transitions to residential. And I think that makes a lot of sense because we were so hung up on like Ace is going to be there forever. And it's like, great, if it's there forever, then it's there forever, but it's not zoned to be there forever. So to me, the most palatable one is the green as well, just because it assumes residential redevelopment in that majority of that whole eastern area, but it still doesn't give us a park that's unusable Because I honestly feel like a 1 acre park is not, I feel like
Just
why
another
even
pocket
have
park.
a 1 acre park personally? I don't know, maybe not why even have, but it does make it a 1 acre park makes it very difficult to utilize that area in an open space way. So the green to me also seems the best.
I agree. I like the green as well. And I like Kevin's proposal to limit it to 6 units per acre. Although that being said, I'm not opposed to keeping in the twin homes or the townhomes as long as it's limited to 6 units per acre. That can give you more of a, I always remember, I can never remember the development that's just south of the Hafoka. Shayla Park, right? That will give it, I mean, that's 6-ish units per acre there. And I don't have any objection to the way that feels.
I wonder too, if we could somehow, I mean, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong with this, Corey, but I wonder if we could say, like with the green, that whole yellow section that's residential redevelopment, and then they have a requirement for some green space, right? Maybe that could be pushed into.
Yeah, that's your interesting part. Our code divides
Green
single
area.
family is not regulated in its green space. So it's just, here's your density. So if somebody came in with a single family subdivision, small lots, it's just front yards, visually public space, backyards, private space, and each lot's developed at a 60-40 ratio. So there's no common green space requirement in a single family development. You have to bump it to the multifamily level to
Which
get into
includes,
the
like,
non-single
townhomes
family.
and twin homes.
To get the
But I'm just wondering if,
open space part.
let's just say we kept green kind of as is with objective 2 going to 6, but if we had it that way, could we somehow like sort of cheat and have the redevelopment open space be part of that green block? And then the city wouldn't have to buy 3 full acres. Do you know what I'm saying? So like the redevelopment would include more than the 5 acres. It would be like 5 and whatever would be required to have that green space. And then we have that green space on that west side that then would flow into, do you know what I'm saying? Does anyone understand what I'm trying to say?
You're essentially coupling the
But I
idea
don't
of,
think you can achieve those levels of acreage because you've got some existing commercial that's not going away. So you're not going to be able to develop those right away unless you won't have the impact fees to.
But I'm just saying, like,
green space.
if there's a way that we could have the redevelopment push their green space on that west side, then we can couple that with any kind of space at the city. So perhaps the city wouldn't have to purchase 3 full acres, and perhaps the redevelopment could utilize that west side.
Yeah, if you recall your numbers, I'm trying to remember them, but they were pretty low. Even at the 12 units an acre, we were only hitting 200 and just barely over 200,000. I think it was like 50-something thousand, 114 or something like that, and 201 or 3.
I'm just purely talking about the placement of the open space, not the cost,
the only way you could
not
achieve,
impact fees.
achieve it is that it's a non-single family development that's required to put its open space and trying to tailor and craft and say all of it is placed over towards this park area. But I think Chair Hershey brings the point is if you have that large of a buffer, there's not much space left to develop anything residential until the remaining east becomes readily available. So you're looking at a whole conversion at that point in time to residential and park.
Right, but hypothetically, the east doesn't get developed. The interior between the park and the east, 400 East, is redeveloped into residential, and it is not single family. It is up to 6 units an acre. It does include some single family and some twin homes or whatever. So there's a requirement to have public open space,
Right.
and that could be housed on the west side of the development.
Right, but your wedge is so small at that point that it will need the conversion of the Dick's Market.
Yeah, I'm talking about the conversion of the Dick's Market.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, what you're saying is the whole eastern half has to reach ripe for redevelopment, and then whatever that obtains to, the eastern half of that develops residential at whatever density you set, and try to create that public-private partnership on a much, much larger piece of green space. And that's why I'm saying that the incentives at that are so minor that it's probably not going to happen.
You know, as I look at all three of them, and I wouldn't mind sending both green and blue up, you know, to the next stage, but seems to me, and I'd like public input on this as well, but it seems to me that if we're going to create some sort of a buffer, a park of any size on the west side of the eastern block, if you will, there's got to be more flexibility for the residential development over the remainder, and to limit it simply to single-family homes, even small lots, is just not going to provide us with the public input. Now, I think that there's a possibility of getting others to participate in the park. There may be, you know, public donations or even others on that block who would participate to create that buffer. We've had indication of an interest in that. So I would hope that as that process was developed, that we could identify a park of sufficient size to make a difference. But I hesitate to go full 3 acres because I just don't think it's doable with the area that we've got there, unless the city comes up with a lot of money. So just to maybe focus this a little bit on our next meeting, we want to have something in front of us, or some things in front of us, that we can present to the public and get public input on. And so I guess the question would be, do we send more than one? And if so, which ones? And do we want to direct staff to modify the ones that we send up to the next stage?
Can I just reiterate again my concern, my major concern? I 100% support a park, but I do have a nagging concern that if we want a park, we need to move forward in that way, because I do not want the city to assume park and then have the area not evaluated, it to further decline, and nothing for it to happen, and then eventually the last thing I want to do is take any land away from anyone at a price that is not.
Yeah, if you part of that's captured back up, and I don't know if I have it in other areas because I'm trying to remember. Goal 2 of the commercial is saying prior to rezoning or redevelopment scenarios, the city goes through that process to see if it's ripe to do it.
Right.
And then if it's not ripe, then it just carries on with the other goal.
Okay, good. I saw that and then forgot about it. Sorry.
Let's break at this point and invite any members of the public who are here who would like to discuss any of these proposals to share their views with us, and then we'll turn it back to the commission for final determination. Anyone like to speak on this issue?
Lauren has served on several committees for parks. I'd love to hear what he has to say about the parks and what his experience has been. Would you mind? And then I'll take a minute.
Oh, wow.
And with that introduction, Pastor,
You're on. Yeah. No, and Becky, I know you've served on the Parks and Rec as well, but I just came off my 6th year in the Parks and Rec Committee, and I don't know how the city works with everything, but typically when the city has money to spend on parks, it approaches the Parks and Rec Committee and asks them to prioritize a list of parks and either land to purchase or facilities to maintain or whatever. So the Parks Committee has developed a list of 30-some projects that it has its eye on, and is working toward one of those being a major redevelopment of Island View Park, which has has had some buy-in with the city council, and a number of other park improvements, some of those that you've seen already. And so I don't know how this whole process works, and maybe this being a new option, maybe the city council would just be excited and go for it. But most of the time, it seems the city asks the Parks Committee to rank things. And so I guess my comment or question would be, how involved has the Parks Committee been, or have they been involved in this process at all? And it might be worth, if they haven't been, speaking with the Parks Committee to figure out where they would place a project like this on their list of projects that they'd like to see done for the city, so that when the city council says, yeah, we want to put $1 million into parks, it goes this direction, rather than if they're going to put $1.7 million into projects, the Parks Committee, we've got a list of things that could easily eat up $5 million or so. I don't know, but the exact number right now. But and if this isn't high on the list, and the city defers to that committee, which is there for that purpose, you could get into a scenario where this never gets traction. I mean, I don't know how it all works, but I'm thinking the way that things have gone in the past, that's sort of how things go. And so I guess that would be my either a question or admonition would be, how involved has the Parks Committee been, and maybe this would be a good time to talk to them a little bit.
I think you make a good point to talk to the Parks Committee as part of a stakeholder. There is a cover here that prior to any rezoning, the city is going to be seeking the Parks and Recreation's input on the expenditure and evaluate whether this would be a good place for a park. Because I do agree with your point is they've already have a master plan, and I'm sure their goals are set towards that master plan, so they'd have to reevaluate, do they want to change and recommend a different direction with that master plan.
And I can say with at least a fair recollection that for the next foreseeable number of years, the RAP tax money is being allocated for the community park redevelopment. And so I know that for several years out, that's already kind of in process. And so it would need some other funding sources. And I know we talked about Island View, which is why I bring up, they have a major redevelopment of Island View that has City Council has signed off on an application for a federal grant, it's a federal grant toward that project. And so
yeah, that grant has been verbally approved by the group.
Yeah, and so just, I know things get tossed around a little bit as possibilities, but there are, there's probably, it would be good to talk to them. So.
Thank you. We mentioned that at the very beginning of this process, but then we didn't do anything about it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate Lawrence. He has stayed the whole time just for that. Thank you. Rock Weininger. That 3 acres that you're referring to is our property. In our discussion, we would love to see you purchase that, and I mean, that would be great. The problem being, in the meantime, what do? In the meantime, we were contacted this week with an offer to buy the old Zions Bank. So the odds of us being around, sticking around, trying to make that 3-acre park even ever happen is slim to none, because we will sell Zions Bank for almost half what you're offering us for that property. If you go to the blue scenario, as I've discussed, as we've talked about, there's a possibility. See, there's something that maybe can work. That's something that fits in, as I understand, to the development. And that could happen. The other two, I don't see any possibility that those ever could happen. Maybe, I don't know, 30 years down the road or something. Unless the city's ready to write a check and buy it. If the city's ready to write a check, we're all for it. Brighton Homes is ready to write a check. They're ready to develop it. They're ready to meet the green space that you're asking for. They want to make it nice. So if the city is not ready to make the check for $1.7 million, we'll just sell Zions Bank to those that offer. You know, they'll want it to be a dentist office. They'll want it to be a beauty parlor. They'll want it to be, you know, that's what it will end up being. And if that's kind of what we want to do, then okay. Because to me, we really only have two choices. That's the blue one, or we just kind of buckle down and just survive and sell little pieces off. At one time, the Bridge Church offered us to buy the old Horseshoe. Because we started this process, they've moved on. So that buried us. You know, that hurt. And I apologize. If I had had any idea that this is what it turns into, I don't think we ever would have done it. We would have gone to Bridge Church and dealt with their offer. And but again, like I say, his lease is up in September. He will be leaving. He was part of today's meeting. So, questions for me?
Any questions for Mr. Weatherby?
Gina, you know, you hit it right on the head with what you talked about. I mean,
Do you feel like that the blue option, you feel like that is realistic?
I think, let's ask Bridge, the Brighton Homes. But let me make it clear, the other two are not going to work. Because unless you've got the money, unless the city has the money and they're ready to move, they could work.
I'm Taylor Spenlove. I'm not a resident of Centerville, and I'm the evil developer that people don't like to listen to. But
you're here enough that you could probably
be
a resident.
The public-private partnership works for us, and I think I mentioned that last week. I know you guys are looking at what works for you and the city, and I understand that. But from a redevelopment standpoint of existing commercial buildings, it's a lot different than raw ground, like we've discussed. Density has to be a factor in redeveloping anything. You know, 6 to 8 units per acre. We'd like to be 7 or 8. One of our proposals was a single-family option, and those lot sizes were very similar to what you described. That was about 7 units per acre. Last time I mentioned with our duplex type project, a public-private partnership for some pickleball courts or something like that is definitely doable. But in a redevelopment scenario, in any redevelopment, to limit it to 4 or 6 units per acre, you're not going to see anybody jumping at that option. The only way for that to work is to devalue the property as it sits now. And I'm saying that because I understand how the financials work, especially as you get closer to Salt Lake. It becomes more and more difficult to redevelop at a lower density. Again, the 3-acre parcels that are proposed on the other two, that doesn't work for us, and it doesn't work for the sellers. That's just, we would just have to walk away at that point, which people may be happy about. But for you to take 3 acres, for them to be able to develop the other 3 acres, the city is going to have to be ready to purchase that when they want, or when they're able to sell the other 3. For those two to align is very difficult. So just keep that in mind. Again, what Gina said, and I don't want to get her into trouble with anybody, but she hit it on the nail on the head. There are parcels, and again, this is, for example, the rezone that you guys turned down on Lund Lane a few months ago. That was what, 3 acres, I think, about $350,000 is what I had that under contract for. And that's because it's raw land. So we're talking about 1.7 for 3 acres. Just keep that into perspective.
Thank you. Anyone else like to comment? Thank you very much. We'll turn it back to the commission. Appreciate the information that we've just received, and I tend to agree that, to me at least, the blue option appears to be the most feasible from a redevelopment standpoint. I am not at all opposed to sending more than one proposal to the public hearing and to discuss it. I think it would be beneficial to allow the public to weigh in on this, and also the stakeholders to weigh in on it at the public hearing and express their views as to the financial viability of redevelopment in the area. But I think it's important that since the public did express strong appetite for a park, that be on the table as well.
I would be supportive of sending out both the green and the blue.
Agree.
Me too.
Yeah, me too.
We have a motion
With the
to that?
corrections.
What's that?
With the corrections.
Yes. Do we have a motion to that effect?
I'll make a motion that we, I'll propose that the planning commission consider the, can I call it the green option and the blue option?
For tonight, yes.
Okay. That we make those part of the public hearing scheduled for September 13th. Is that what we?
Is that the next meeting?
We should have had somebody more eloquent than me to make that motion.
I second that.
That's a great motion. Any further comment or debate?
Logan, what are your thoughts?
Oh, man, you don't want to know my thoughts.
They'll change in a second anyway, so, you know.
I do want to know your thoughts.
Yeah,
actually.
I'm super frustrated that we can't send this up right now. I've been tempted to just move to decline so we can send it up right away for the sake of speed. But I am open to a park. I think if you want a park, you do all 6 acres and you pony up the money for it, or 7 acres, or whatever it is, and you try to make that work. If you don't, I don't even see the need for the 3 or the 1 acre park. I think you do a development for the whole thing, and you give tools to the group to make a park that makes more sense with the whole site. 8 acres is a minimum in my head. That's all my thoughts.
You know, I will stick to what I was saying, agreeing that the blue, to me, I almost feel like the 1 acre park. I mean, why even do that? I agree with you on that.
Well, yeah, remember the feature though, it'll be a partnership issue, it's not just a park. So the advantage that staff sees with the feature element is you're right across from the elementary school, you have a good break. With the residential, you'll see increased pedestrian, and it have some small feature area that can be used by the residents of the project as well as the community. In a partnership situation is not just having an independent park, a small park. If we were just to buy it for a small pocket park, I think that changes even my thoughts on it.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So you're saying this is not a pocket park, right?
Well, it's a pocket park, but it's
But it's not just us buying it as a pocket park.
right. It's a
Which is
feature
what I'm
that we're
against.
sharing with the open space of the development, and we're buying the easement right through the impact fees or whatever to be able to use it publicly. So it's not fenced off and kept from the public.
That's what I was trying to explain when I kept saying they would have theirs on the west side, but yes.
And that's what the feature is. If it was just a city purchase, small 1 acre park, for us to use and maintain separately than the residential development, yeah, I think that's a whole different scenario.
I agree.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
But I'm not trying to talk you into the future. You can still have
That's
the
what I was-
value that that's not worth it, and let's not
That's
do
what I
it.
was trying to argue before, but I wasn't eloquent about having the easement.
Or it's
so
just
that-
late and my brain wasn't receiving
No,
it.
it's okay. But I guess that would depend on, I mean, I guess the easement and everything still goes back to what the size of that would be and what is feasible for redevelopment versus otherwise.
Okay, well, we have a motion to send up green and blue with corrections to the public hearing. Appreciate your comments, Logan. It would be nice to move beyond that, but as Commissioner Daly points out, we don't want to ram anything. How did you say that?
Ram it down their throats.
I would like to get public input on this.
I'd like that on the minutes too. When you
I think that's what we've kind of planned here. So, any other comments, or should we ready to vote?
Can I just make one small grammatical comment on objective 4? It looks weird to me to capitalize Eastern and then lowercase block. I would either capitalize them all or not.
Sure.
Very ticky-tack there, Corey.
No problem. This was written really late night before packets went out. So.
And I would say just not capitalize either.
Yeah, that would be my preference too.
It's not a legal description.
Thinking of like the Eastern Bloc, you know, the old
Germany.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Change it to Warsaw Pact.
Well, we're being technical.
Uh-oh.
Look what you did.
In the introduction paragraph before you get to red, I just thought this was kind of cool. This half of block area is located deep off Main Street, and any redevelopment will have a greater effect on the residential character of this neighborhood than the other western half. I think we only have one western half.
True.
But all is not quiet on the western front.
Maybe we have two, but I think we just have one western half, so you could take the other out.
Okay, fine. Sorry, one more thing then. On objective 4, you have if such park, comma, is deemed feasible, comma. I think you have one too many commas there. If such park is deemed feasible, comma.
Yes.
All right. And I propose with only those grammatical changes that we send it up.
Are we locking it in now?
No more grammatical
Hey,
changes.
put it this way, if you're picking on grammar at this point, I'm
Uh-huh.
feeling really good about what was drafted.
All right, we ready to vote?
Yes.
Yeah.
Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Thank you very much for your input. Appreciate it. We'll now move to the Community Development Director's Report. Corey? Make it quick.
Cassie, you have projects in amended site plans?
Those are up to you if they're on.
Yeah, so I think the two that are submitted will probably be staff, but they may not be. They're associated with the Quick Quack. So they may not be on there. We do have, I believe, Dr. Samuelson's final site plan that was just submitted today, because today's the deadline. Anything else come in on today? Trying to remember, but, so a couple items. And then I mentioned the gradation, I think we put here, the granulation is coined by Councilmember McEwen. They're really broad in their requests, so it's been interesting for staff to try to put a rope around it and see if we can corral it in. But you will see, and it will be specific to the RM for now, because that's the target zone rather than the RH. But I think it answers a lot of the questions, not fully maybe, but it's starting to address what the commission had on the goals about the RM zone because of the FOCA. I'm taking that experience into drafting some of the language, and so you'll be seeing that granulation with some development standards and some changes to the use lists based on those development standards. And it'll just be some additional quivers to use as they apply different zoning to different mediums. And I'm trying to define the parameters of how that granulation is applied and where and when it's applied. So it's not going to get everybody what they want, though, from all the past discussions, but I think it's a good baseline to start from. So look forward to that.
And you'll add to the agenda, of course, the discussion and the hearing on these two.
Yes, you'll have that. That's scheduled. True. And then hopefully you're up to date on the council.
Yep. Okay. Anything else? Thank you again, staff, for your really, really fine report and very long report. I asked my secretary to print it off. She called me up. I was out of town. She called me up. She said, it's 103 pages. You really want me to print that off? I said, no. But thank you. A lot of hard work for preparation for this week, and we commend you for a job well done. Anyone want to adjourn?
I so move.
Okay. Been moved? All
Second.
right. In favor?
Aye.
They don't get to weigh in.